Good evening, everyone. I would like to call the Grafton Select Board meeting for August 18, 2020 to order. Just want to go over some ground rules this evening. I'm sure you've all heard this before, but I'm going to repeat them. This is about regarding public meetings, remote participation and guidelines, in addition to some of the rules and regs that we're going to follow to conduct our meeting this evening. So pursuant to Governor Baker's March 12, 2020 order suspending certain provisions of the Open Meeting Law, General Law, Chapter 38, Section 18, the Governor's March 15, 2020 order imposing strict limitations on the number of people that may gather in one place. The various boards and committees representing the town of Grafton will conduct their public meetings and hearings via remote participation. No in-person attendance of members of the public will be permitted. Town of Grafton will be using the Zoom meeting application to conduct this remote meeting. Real quick, just some of the protocols for the remote meeting and use of this webinar feature. I would just like to remind everyone that all participants that are participating in this evening's meeting, please be sure that you name yourself, your first and last name for identification purposes. Just a reminder that if you are sharing your screen, that anything that you share on your screen will be available to the public. So please, if you need to share anything, be cognizant that that would be anything that is sensitive would be available for public viewing during this meeting and during the broadcast. Computer participants, are encouraged to click on the feature in Zoom to view all participants and use the question and answer function to pose questions on the bottom of the screen. Just a reminder that all questions will be monitored by Vice Chair Doreen DeFazio, and questions will not be addressed until after the committee is completed its initial discussion. Just real quick, as the chair, please ask for the floor through me so I may identify you and give you the floor and keep an orderly meeting this evening. I myself as chair will now conduct a roll call of the board who is present this evening. When I call your name, please reply in the affirmative that you're present. Ms. Doreen DeFazio.
DeFazio present.
Mr. Matt Often.
Matt Often's present.
Ms. Colleen Roy.
Colleen Roy present.
Mr. Ed Prisby.
Present.
And Peter Carl's present. Okay, staff, Town of Grafton staff, Ms. Rebecca Meekins.
Here.
Mr. Paul Canoyer.
Here.
And town attorney, Ms. Ginny Kramer.
Hi, I'm here tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. And we have a participant tonight, Ms. Ethel Jaggi.
I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, with that, we're going to move to our first item of the agenda, and that is to read some announcements that I have for the public. I'm sad to announce the passing of retired police chief Russell Messier on August 10th. Chief Messier served the Grafton Police Department for 35 years, 10 of those years as the chief of police. Upon his retirement, Grafton Chief Messier also served the town of Westboro for many years as special police officer. Throughout his tenure, Chief Messier also found time to volunteer on several boards and committees throughout Grafton. On behalf of the Select Board, we send our sincere condolences to his wife, Janice, his two daughters, Judy, Deborah, his extended family, close friends, and to the Grafton Police Department. Just a reminder, early voting for the September state primary will take place at the Grafton Municipal Center Gymnasium beginning Saturday, August 22nd through Friday, August 28th. Please visit the town's website for additional details. Applications to vote by mail must be received by 5 p.m. Wednesday, August 26th. Anyone voting by mail may leave their official sealed ballot envelopes in a red box located at the front of the municipal center. Absentee ballots cannot be left at polling locations. They must be received by the town clerk's office before 8 p.m. on September 1st. And that is all the announcements I have. Ms. Roy, do we have any public comments this evening?
No public comment comments. We have correspondence later, though.
Thank you. Okay. Without further ado, first up on our schedule this evening is we have Adams Road. I just want to remind the committee that we're on a tight schedule this evening. We have our first temporary town administrator interview scheduled for 7:15. So at this time, I would like to introduce Ms. Jaggi to the board, as well as Mr. Canoyer and Ms. Kramer, as well as Ms. Meekins, to discuss the developments that are occurring on Adams Road with regards to drainage. Ms. Jaggi, you asked for an agenda item this evening. I will hand the floor over to you.
First of all, I'd like to see if I can get an update from Jenny Kramer and Rebecca Meakin and Paul about what the current status is, since they've, I guess I'm inquiring to see if they've signed the contracts with Brian Kelly or not that were on the agenda for the 21st of July.
The board signed the easement agreements, and the board also voted to release the affordable restriction on the property.
Okay, so there's nothing more needed from Brian Kelly for you guys to move forward on the road work?
No.
Okay, so I have a question for Jenny Kramer. Who's representing the town as legal counsel right now? Is it you or Christopher Alpin?
Mr. Carlson, if I may.
Yes, Ms. Kramer, please.
I just wanted to state that the board did sign the easement agreements to which Brian Kelly and his counsel, after many meetings with staff, arrived at. And subsequent to that, Mr. Kelly has made several requests for a couple more items to be included. That is something that was communicated to me by his substitute counsel while his counsel was on vacation, and I sent that over to town staff. Paul Canoyer and I had a conversation about that, I think maybe on Friday, and he doesn't see any, they're pretty technical requests, not legal requests. So he didn't see any problem with that. So I called the substitute counsel for Mr. Kelly, and he just returned my call today, but we still have not connected. So I do believe that there are going to be some updates to that, to those documents. But it appears that, it's not going to be problematic to make the changes that he's requested.
So may I ask what those technicalities are?
He wants the ability, Paul, maybe you'd be better to explain that.
He wants the ability to be able to relocate the easement on the undeveloped lot, better suit building of a house, which, as long as the drain continues to flow out the area it is, that's not a problem. We do it when properties are redeveloped, we have to do that all the time. So that's not an issue.
Hasn't that already been agreed to?
Ms. Jaggi, allow Mr. Canoyer to finish that statement before asking the next question, please. Thank you.
If somebody buys that lot and says, listen, can I move that drain pipe 10 feet? It's not going to change the outfall location, just make a little angle adjustment to it. That would be fine. As long as the outfall stays in the same location, it's not an issue. So that was really the biggest change they were requesting. And then it was the permanent easement along the frontage of both lots, which really just allows the town to have access along the stone wall right at the street line. So it's not way down on the property, it's right at the street line, which was largely, hopefully just remain trees and scrub brush anyway. So there was no showstoppers in their request. It's just something that would have to be added to the items.
Okay, great. That's good news. I'm glad to hear that. The other question I have for Jenny Kramer is, as far as the emails that went back and forth between Paul Corner and yourself regarding lots 32, 34, 36, that the town wanted to move. This is my biggest concern. This is really why I came on to the meeting tonight. The emails that went back and forth between Paul and Jenny Kramer, unfortunately for them, was CC to my attorney, in which all of you also have received, and as well as communications from my attorney regarding the initial contract that the town wanted me to sign. You guys have all that information in your emails. You should hopefully, I would hope you have read them, and you all know what's going on with this situation with my lot 34. This has been ongoing for 2 years for me. My husband is here. He is joining me tonight as well. This is preventing me from moving forward and selling my home, and this has been a problem since they installed the drainage pipe in 2018. I know that my husband and I signed a contract on May 19th, and the town of Grafton, I had sent it to them for them to give them license and indemnification agreement to come onto my property to be able to do the work. And that was May 19th. They never got back to me. On July 13th, I believe I called the town hall, left a message. Rebecca Minkin called me back. She told me, she gave me an informal update about the contracts being signed with Brian Kelly because I had not heard from the town, God, since May. I mean, only in May for the contract they sent me, but I've had no updates since October town meeting on what the town was doing. So Rebecca gave me an informal update, and then I seen the emails that went back and forth between Jenny Kramer and Paul Corner, and I was quite upset about that and disturbed at the fact that they were even considering doing the road and completing the road, rerouting the drainage pipe, and not taking into consideration our lots 32, 34, and 36. They were going to do the work and leave our lots, leave the infrastructure in place that they had put there, not fix our properties, not fix the land, and just move forward and do the work and walk away. Rebecca Minkin, when I spoke to her on the 13th of July, I asked her about my contract, and she said she'd get back to me. She spoke with Paul, and Paul Corner sent me another contract, totally like not even close to what I had signed. And it was a very generic contract, and it wasn't even referencing my property. And they were looking for a 3-year easement that they wanted to register and put on my lot. And then I read in the Grafton News, the only way Paul covered that up was they wanted a 3-year easement right away to come back and repair my property after they did the road work. I'm like, no way, I'm not going to give a 3-year easement on my lot because I want to sell my property. And when somebody goes to pull my lot information, my deed, there's going to be an easement on the property. For 3 years, you guys need 2 days or 3 days to repair the work on the lot. And you're looking for a 3-year easement? That's not right. And you're planning to do the whole road work and not even considering putting together a contract for my lot to fix it in the process. Paul, I don't know how dare you guys, I think you guys can do that. Laugh about it. He's sitting there with a smile on his face. It's not fair. I have a family here. I have children here. I want to sell my house and move forward. 2 years ago, I can't even consider doing that because why? Contaminated stormwater drainage coming on my lot. I can't do a home equity line of credit. I can't refinance. I can't sell my house. Nobody can do a conventional loan on my property because I have stormwater drainage, contaminated stormwater drainage for the last 2 years coming out of that infiltration pipe, flooding my lot and going and flooding my neighbor's lot. How would you guys all feel if that was your house and your property? I have so much equity tied up in this home and I can't do anything with it. It's not right. And then you're sitting there, Paul and Ginny, we're just going to leave it. It's aesthetics only. The reality is if I were to test my soil on my property because of the stormwater drainage, you would be digging up at the front of my whole lot, taking out all that soil that's contaminated and having to replace all of it. I've not tested it yet. But I guarantee you if I test it, I'm in default of my current mortgage because I'm in breach of my current mortgage contract because on the back of it states I have 30 days to tell them should somebody be contaminating my land. And yes, the town of Grafton is contaminating my land and I've been in breach of my contract for 2 years. My mortgage company can come and pull my property. It's not right. And now I'd like to know who's representing the town. Is it Christopher or is it Jimmy Kramer?
Ms. Jackie, I believe that was answered already. I just wanted to have you here tonight to discuss just what the developments are, what's going on today. This board has been informed that work is going to be eminently done on that area to remediate some of the conditions. I believe within the next week or two, work will be done to begin that. Mr. Knoyer, is that correct in the schedule? Is that still what we understood?
Yeah, Peter. So I don't know how much we want to go into this. As Ginny said, we're still ongoing with Kelly. So the emails that Ethel's referring to her attorney wasn't, put on there by accident. It was a deliberate. So he saw the emails that I sent. In the email that I sent, I did say, I want to get this completed as quickly as possible, and we can negotiate with Ethel for the structure removal at the same time as the install. Everyone has waited long enough for this to be done. I would like to be off the road before school starts. If we need to have the board sign at 2 different meetings, that's fine. So, yeah, I want to get it done as fast as we can, because while school's delayed, there's no detours around that location. The buses don't go down Estabrook Road, so we need to be off the road. So our plan is to install the drainage pipe in the street, hopefully starting next week or the week after at the latest, from the existing pipe to Brian Kelly's property line, while Ginny continues to negotiate with Kelly. And then once that negotiation is done, we'll continue the pipe to the backside of that lot 38. And that's our plan. It's been our plan since the beginning. It's just a matter of getting everything lined up. And once that, once the easement's done, once that's done, the road work is done, we can pave the road and be off that street. So that's the goal, is at least to be off that road, have the pipe to the property line, and then go once everything's finalized with Brian Kelly. So.
Great. Thanks, Mr. Canoyer. Before we start moving on to our 7:15, does any of the board members have any other questions? Ms. Jaggi, please.
I would like to know.
Ms. Jaggi, please.
Contract.
Please, Ms. Jaggi, please. Before we move on, I wanted to ask the board members if they had any questions. No, okay, Ms. Jaggi, we're about to move on. Was there one last thing that you wanted to bring up?
My concern is they're gonna do the road and they're not gonna come back and repair the lots. And they had sent me a contract in May. I signed it and sent it back, and the town did not move on that. And the delay is not on my side, it's on the town side. So I'd like to see a contract in place, fix our lots, or my lot, prior to and while they're doing the road work. I don't want to wait until after the road work is done and have them come back. And they were requesting a 3-year easement to be able to come back and do that. That time frame is way too long. It's not even realistic. I know today my attorney spoke to me, and he had spoken with. Excuse me?
Peter?
Yes, Ms. Kramer?
Yeah, Ms. Jaggi, what we sent the easement after Chris and I had a discussion, Chris is the associate in my firm, very experienced in land transactions. And he looked into it, reviewed the matter, and felt that an easement was the correct instrument in order to protect the town. So we sent a proposed draft easement to your council. Your council didn't request changes or, send back a red line document indicating points of contention or things with which he didn't agree. He sent back a response saying that you were refusing to sign, as is your right. So I informed the town that you did not want to sign it, and if your council wants to propose some revisions, we're happy to take a look at them. You can ask him to do that, but that's the normal course of how these things are negotiated. There's a first draft that's circulated, and then changes can be made, and then I'd take it back to the town and see if the changes he proposed were acceptable, etc. But what he said instead was that you were not going to sign the easement. So I'm happy to have those conversations, or have Chris have those conversations with your council, but we need to.
Can I just respond to that?
Refusal. Ms. Jaggi, we have to move on. I think
I just want to respond to this.
I want to say something for 1 minute, please, Ms. Jaggi. So it sounds like Ms. Kramer has asked you and your attorney to come back with any revisions and changes, and I believe that's what you're requesting at this point in time.
No, that's not what I'm requesting. So I'd like to just give her current information, because it sounds like she's currently dealing with this with my attorney on an attorney level.
Yeah, and that should be there. It shouldn't be here.
Yeah, and I just want to say one more thing.
Okay.
My attorney spoke to me today, and he told me he was in communications with Chris, and he told me that Chris was very welcoming to the initial contract that we signed on May 19th, a license and indemnification agreement. And we did talk about an easement, and he said, we are not going to, there's no reason to allow an easement. And Chris had agreed with him on the phone about that. And the other thing he indicated to me was, he's not sure who's running the show, whether it's you or him. And knowing that you're working for the same law firm, that's why I was inquiring whether you are in control of this procedure with my attorney, or is Chris now the main contact? Because based on what Chris told him today, Chris was very comfortable with the contract that we had done on 5/19 and that we signed.
Mr. Chair, we've got to move on.
Yep, I'm gonna close this down right now. Miss
Let me-
Jackie, Miss
I
Jackie,
just wanna know
no,
if
that
you're
was your
gonna-
last thing. Miss Jackie, that was your last thing. Miss
And then-
Jackie, you're out of order.
I just want to
You're out of order, Miss Jackie.
Well,
You're
then-
out of order.
This is not fair. This
You
is
know what? You're
really not
out of
fair.
order, Miss
This-
Jackie.
I don't even know why I came on. It's not fair.
Miss
This is
Jackie,
not
you're out
fair.
of order. We're moving on. Have your attorneys reach out to ours and continue the discussion. That's where this belongs.
I really don't want them to finish the road without considering our lots. It's wrong. We waited 2 years
All
for
right.
this.
Miss Jackie, thank you very much. We have to move on. We have a 7:15 with somebody to come on board here to interview for temporary town administrator position.
It's really wrong.
Okay? Thank you very much. Please stay in touch with our attorneys
Yeah, I
and
don't know why
continue
I-
resolving the matter. Thank you. Okay, let's move on to Mr. Taranzini's interview for 7:15. I apologize for running a few minutes behind, but if we can invite Mr. Taranzini into the meeting.
Yeah, I will, I'll bring him in and then I'm going to make
Of
you the,
course.
okay?
Okay. Thank you. All right. Good evening, Mr. Taranzini. How are you?
Good evening, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for having me this evening.
Great. Thank you for taking the time with us. We're running a little bit tight schedule, but that's on me. All right. So this evening, you're one of the finalists for the temporary town administrator interviews. The board has compiled a list of questions which I distributed to everyone. They're going to ask in the order, starting with Ms. DeFazio, followed by Mr. Often, followed by Mr. Prisby, Ms. Roy, and myself, and we're going to go down that order until we go through our questions. So the board has got everything in front of them prepared to ask their questions for Mr. Taranzini. Okay, without further ado, Mr. Taranzini, again, welcome. My name is Peter Carlson, the chair of the select board. I didn't know if everyone else wanted to go around and introduce themselves before we go at our first question. Ms. DeFazio?
Sure. Hi, Mr. Taranzini. Thank you for joining us. My name is Doreen DeFazio. I'm the vice chair of the board. Welcome.
Good evening.
Mr. Alton?
Yes, welcome to our meeting, Mr. Taranzini. I appreciate you spending some time with us this evening. My name is Matthew Often. I'm a member of the board. Nice to meet you.
Thank you.
Ms. Roy?
Same. It's a pleasure to meet you, Mr. Taranzini. Thanks for taking time out of your night tonight. My name's Colleen, and I'm the clerk of the board.
Hi, Mr. Taranzini. I'm Ed Prisby. Thanks for joining us.
My pleasure, folks.
Okay. Mr. Taranzini, before we get into the questions, did you want to give an opening statement, just a little bit about yourself, and then we'll get into the questions?
With the exception of 2 years, are a New England native. The vast majority of my working career in Western Massachusetts, Central, North Central, and then a little bit of what my supervisor at the former Department of Environmental Management called ambassador with portfolio, whether it was Blackstone Valley or some different projects that I worked on. Vast majority of my experience has been in smaller communities. I did work for the city of Pittsfield for a while, but somewhere from the 4,000 seasonal, which has about a 24,000 pop come Memorial Day to Columbus Day to Spencer, which is around 12,000 people. I took full-time retirement about 5 years ago and quickly was overcome with how bored I was. So I had an opportunity to help a small community about 40 minutes south of me through some troubled times, do the recruitment for theirs. And then after a short break, went down to Templeton, signing up for 4 months. That was 4 years ago. They had some real trouble recruiting. I do not think you folks will have the kinds of troubles they had. We created a succession plan, and I'm now ready to exit them after I think what is a pretty good record of accomplishment that the folks at DOR would tell you is quite a financial turnaround for the community. These are things that I enjoy. I enjoy helping communities through these kinds of transitions as they look for that right fit for the new entry into their organization. And I work at what's needed for the town, whether it's 3 days or 3 days plus almost unlimited. I've become a little too familiar, I think, as we all have with Zoom. But I saw your opportunity, and it's a well-run town going back to when I knew Russ Connors many years ago, who worked there. I don't think you'll have troubles, but you probably are looking at a 6 to 7 month period until you can get that permanent administrator in there.
Appreciate that. Thank you very much for that intro. All right, so why don't we start, Mr. Fazio, if you want to start with your first question.
Sure. So the first question is, what are the unique characteristics you bring that would make you the best candidate to bridge the gap between our last TA and our future TA?
Well, I think that one of the things that I can do is I'm not looking for permanent employment. So I'm not looking to be hired someplace else and have say to you, geez, we agreed on 4 months and now I need to move on, and leaving you in the lurch in any fashion whatsoever. Also, I'm known for completing the work. I really hadn't planned to be in Templeton for 4 years. It simply became what we had to do to create a succession plan, go out there and hire a young MPA graduate and mentor them for 2 years to a point where they were really ready to take the reins over. So I think that's kind of unique, sort of from the short term to the long term possibility. I have working knowledge of many folks in central Massachusetts, an extremely strong financial record that I think pales in comparison to none. And while the state has made a great gesture in saying that the unrestricted general government aid for FY21 will be the same as FY20, there are still economic shocks that are going to have to be dealt with. And more important, we haven't even finished FY21, and it will be time to deal with FY22, which is where the real shocks are going to be. It's not this fiscal year, it's in the out fiscal years. So between my ability to look at organizational structures, give you an honest evaluation of changes that I think might be needed, to pick up the baton of projects that were in place, to prioritize those, to make the maximum use of my time, and to watch the financial dollars as they evolve going into the FY22, I believe are the greatest strengths I can offer you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Taranzini. Mr. Opton, you're up.
Certainly. So this is a fairly short-term, 3 to 6 month position. I'm interested in this important role, what your immediate objectives and priorities would be for the first 30 days. Thank you.
So for the first 30 days, I really need to look at the projects that are on the desk. What are their critical deadlines? Here in my community, that would be preparing for the fall town meeting. It would be getting 2 major projects out to contract for construction. It would be to tend to those care dollars. I don't know what your community was allotted. We're allotted around $717,000. They have to be spent by December 31. And I'm really not willing to leave any of those federal dollars on the table if we can avoid it whatsoever. So I want to take a look at what applications you have filed. Have we exercised all the creativity that we could in getting those dollars in and then getting them expended and accounted for properly? So projects you have on the table, the CARES dollars, the FEMA dollars that are recaptured, finding out where you are on your FY21 audit and your free cash for FY20, so that you can get ready for that fall town meeting, begin your capital planning, and be in a position to begin your FY22 planning. Also, most importantly, is to understand what the board's priorities are. I am your, I don't want to use the phrase tool, but agent to accomplish those tasks that are important to you. So CARES monies, FEMA monies, the audit, closing out the fiscal year, understanding what your priorities are, understanding where key priorities are, and to make sure that I've met with all the staff, key boards and commissions in a quick round robin to understand what's of concern to them.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Prisby.
Chair, Mr. Taranzini, first, is that a picture of Lake Winnipesaukee in the background that you got there?
I'm afraid that's Lake Champlain.
Oh, okay. It's very pretty.
As a Vermonter, you know, I may live in New Hampshire, but in our hearts, we're always Vermonters. My family from the Rutland, Vermont, up to Burlington region.
Excellent. It's very pretty. Here's my question, and you've sort of answered part of this already, and I thank you for that. Obviously, you're not new to the process of coming into a smaller community and getting a hold of it. But as you mentioned, this is going to be a turbulent 12 months, I think. How are you specifically going to go about the process of evaluating Grafton's present fiscal needs and condition and beginning the FY22 budget process? And obviously the reason I ask is because we're already in August. As you said, it's going to be a 6-month process. You may be well along in the budget process before you hand that baton over.
Yeah. So the first thing first, I need to understand where you are on your FY20. We've already closed our books. Our audit has commenced. I expect that by September 5 to September 10, we'll have submitted our balance sheet to DOR for our free cash, having it certified for September 15 to be used at what is scheduled to be a November 4 fall town meeting. Next, I need to look at the FY21 numbers. How were those estimates done? Do I have any concerns over them? Can I elaborate on those concerns such that I'm not stepping on somebody's toes? The worst thing you can do is walk into a town and say, where did this number come from? And cast aspersions on the number. So I really need to get behind it. And if I don't feel comfortable that I can say to you, these are good numbers, I need to be able to talk with the person who generated those numbers and talk about why it came to be and talk about why we think it should be something different getting into your tax rate, your recap sheet. I also need to understand where your assessor is. Have they submitted the values? Because I can have free cash, I can have budgets. If those values haven't been submitted and aren't going to be quickly forthcoming, we can't get that recap sheet in on a timely manner. So that is frankly a deep dive that I do generally with relative ease. You know, when I went into Spencer, I think I had about an hour and a half with their audits and could see some of the problems right away, right down to collection rates. Now, I am the interim. I'm there to keep the boat afloat, make sure it doesn't take on any leaks, and it continues on a reasonable path while you're hiring the new person. So those are the things that I would dive into right away. I also need to understand where the landmines are. There's a reason you've parted company with somebody after 12 years. I just need to make sure I don't step on the same landmine. And to the extent that I can have a good working relationship with your boards, commissions, and department heads, I want to try to get off on the right foot right out of the box. because I need them to succeed on your behalf.
Thank you. Ms. Roy?
What concerns do you have becoming an interim TA during the time of COVID?
It is always a delicate balance between sitting back and saying, we'll let the next person deal with that. Right down to I've seen towns say, well, yeah, the police chief resigned, but why don't we wait for the new TA or TM to take over that? Yeah, this happened, but why don't we wait for the next person? Managers come into situations to manage the resources and the personnel that are there. So it's a delicate balance between, you don't want to sit back and do nothing, because that, yes, maybe I didn't put a hole in the boat. Yes, maybe I plugged a hole or two, but the object of an interim manager is to keep the boat moving a little bit forward also. The other side of the coin is you come in and you say, you ought to do this, 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 and this, and it's exhausting to everybody. Well, they aren't even going to be here. Why are they doing all of these things? Why are they creating this ruckus? So the most important thing to me is getting my hands very quickly around the current culture of the community, the books and the projects, the challenges, and trying to find that delicate balance that keeps the waters calm. But we're not just treading water. We're not just sitting still as we await that new administrator. And we don't want to poison the well for them coming in, because they will have their ideas as well once they get fully ensconced into the job. So it's that balance that's very, to me, very tricky.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Taranzini, my question. So do you view this temporary position here in Grafton as a part-time or full-time commitment until the permanent town administrator is appointed?
Well, under the statutes, I'm allowed to work 940 hours a year. That has been lifted up until December 31 at this point for an unlimited number of hours for retirees coming back in. I have found in most of the jobs that I'm able to do it being there physically present 3 days a week. Now that day may be an 8 a.m. to 10 p.m., depending upon what you're doing with public hearings, citizen comments, that type of thing. And then remotely and working on documents available by email and the like, I have found work. Even in Templeton now, I'm doing 2 to 3 days physically present a week, though I'm working on the other time. The other reason that I do that is my original contract in Templeton, I did 16 hours a week, which the town paid me for. And I donated the balance of hours that needed to get the job done so that I did not run afoul of that state mandate on the 940 hours. If you need full-time, certainly in the beginning, we can discuss that. It's hard for me to sit here today and tell you, because I know the town as a well-run town with a good set of books and good finances. If there's something else going on that I'm not aware of that needs more attention, then yeah, certainly in the beginning, we'd have to put more time into it. And certainly in the beginning, that first 2, 3, 4 weeks, I would need to put more time in to get that deep dive and to get that circulation through the department heads, some of your key boards and commissions, and this body to understand what are the greatest priorities. I'm afraid that's kind of a neither fish nor fowl answer. It's generally part-time, 3 days, we'll do it, plus that extra time.
All right, Mr. Fazio.
Thank you, Mr. Taranzini. So you sort of answered this question a little bit before, talking about your experience in, I think, northern central Massachusetts, you said. So my question is, do you have any sort of prior relationships with the town of Grafton that would help you serve in this role? And if not particularly with Grafton, what do you know about our community?
Well, I've always known Grafton as a well-run community, sort of the the head, if you will, headed towards the Blackstone Valley neighbor with your connection to transit and the like. I have been away from Central Mass for a while, and I do not know any of your current department heads. However, I'm a quick study, and I think that if you talk with any of my other prior communities, they'll tell you that within a couple of weeks, I really have some pretty good institutional knowledge.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Often.
Certainly. So maintaining public confidence in town operations is one of the most important parts of this role, as I see it. I'm wondering what you would do to engage internal stakeholders as well as the public to achieve that objective. Thank you.
A little bit tougher for an interim or a temporary. Let me tell you what I've done up here. Issued a weekly administrator's report that all of the department heads have to contribute to. It's really not horribly burdensome, except maybe on Cindy, who has to kind of grab everything, all the emails that come in and put it together. We get that out every week, goes on our front page. I've done a series of Talk of the Town. Every month I bring in a different department head. I bring in a local nonprofit. We bring in a hot topic of the moment of what's going on. Again, COVID makes life a little more complicated. We have used community meetings, but we don't even do a road project anymore in Templeton. In the fall, when the DPW director knows the roads he wants to do, he has to have a neighborhood meeting. Then in the spring, before he goes to do it, he has to have a neighborhood meeting, and he bloody well better be listening to what they're saying and responding. Now, he can't necessarily fix every issue, but he has to listen and he has to respond. My department heads come together and deliver a quarterly report. As a team, we work on the team model up here, the public works team, finance team, public safety, what we call community services and development services are our main teams. They present to the select board live or Zoom in this case. Those reports, you can go right to the Templeton, Mass website, look at reports and presentations. You'll see every quarterly report that there is. And I've gotten my folks to understand that when somebody calls and says, I need you to do this, before they dismiss it because they were working on something else, they really need to talk to the citizen to make sure they get an answer, understand what they need. And in general, there's always detractors of some fashion. But in general, I think you would find that folks in Spencer certainly, and now in Templeton, two local Massachusetts models for you, would agree that it was a well-run, reasonably transparent organization, that they could understand why we were doing what we were doing.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Roy.
Did we skip one or?
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Prisby, my bad. I did, yep.
No, that's okay. Actually, I'm going to be skipped because I'll tell you, Mr. Taranzini, you've already actually asked my question. We've got a series of questions here that we're doing for everybody. And you've already answered mine. So Colleen, you're up.
Mr. Prisby, let me just read that question so everyone knows what that was real quick. So Mr. Prisby was going to ask, how do you view the role of temporary town administrator and how does that differ from the role of permanent town administrator? I agree, Mr. Taranzini, you did provide a number of responses to that through the other questions. So if you go good, we'll move on to Ms. Roy's question. Okay.
In your experience as interim TA, what additional support can the board provide to ensure a smooth transition, if any?
Making it very clear up front what your short-term needs and priorities are. If there are reasons as to why you parted company with the last administrator, having the chair share those with me so I do not step on that landmine. That's very important. And then I need the board to prepare. We hold in each of the communities I've worked in, retreat in the fall to prepare for budget. We circulate some planning tools for that, and we need the board to be as thoughtful as it can be. Hopefully participating in that. I don't know if you use that process now, because some view the budget as a compilation of numbers. I view it as the single biggest policy document of the year. I need to know what you want to accomplish before we can get tackling that budget. So making clear what your priorities are, and if there is an order of urgency to them, helping me understand the pecking order between those priorities, helping me understand the whys and wherefores of every small community that are so important, those interpersonal relationships that can make you a success or break you, even in a short term. And then helping me to clearly understand your priorities for the coming budget year so that we can get those to the staff, because those priorities may need money and they may need a department head to think about, how am I going to get this done? Can I do it in 1 year? Can I do it in 2 years? Those are the three immediate things that, quite frankly, will come upon us very quickly, I dare say by 1 October. The first two within 15 days, the retreat by 1 October, if you decide you would like to participate in that process.
Okay. Okay, my question. So Taranzini, so upon appointment of a new permanent town administrator, how would you handle the transition? How much time would you require to assist with the new TA appointment?
So what I've done in most communities is to prepare a briefing paper, have a study documents ready, and to spend a day going through it all with them and then being available by phone. I don't do a lot of, this person is like this person's like that, here's what you need to watch out for. Let them make their own decisions on all of that. I would neither pump the balloon nor poison the well, is an expression I guess I would use. However, I'm on call for a substantial period of time, and my contract in Templeton actually has me, when the succession plan is triggered in the next few weeks, I actually remain on call for 1 year for projects, particularly a couple of projects that, quite frankly, it's probably best that I finish out as opposed to somebody trying to pick the baton up on. And that would be with what your needs are too. If you find someone from out of state that needs a little bit more of what's Massachusetts all about, that might need a little bit more introduction to area managers, introduction to some state officials. I think that would rely upon your needs at the point of transition. You might get an extremely experienced person from Central Mass that's looking forward to an opportunity to step up to a community such as Grafton.
Thank you. All right, next up, Mr. Rofton.
So the next question is a duplicate, so I'll
Oh, is it? I
yield.
apologize.
I'll yield to Doreen.
Thank you. Sorry about that. All right, Ms. Fazio.
Thank you. And Mr. Taranzini, you've already answered my question, which probably, should have been one of the first questions, which is, have you ever served as a temporary TA before, and what was your experience like? And I think that you've answered that in detail, so we will move on from that question.
Okay.
Mr. Rofton?
All right, so this is the did you do your homework question. Based on what you know about Grafton, what do you see as our biggest challenges immediately, and how does your experience help to address those challenges?
Well, I think that Grafton's greatest challenge is that facing all communities. How do we get the kids back into school? We're sharing half of our CARES money with our regional school district. I think we're the only community in the state that's doing that. So we have a close coordination with our superintendent. We have constantly challenged people want to play sports. We've said no. They want the building reopened. You know, people are, they're breaking out in hives with cabin fever. So I think that COVID is not done. And dealing with COVID in a way that meets public health needs and public safety needs, and possibly needing to withstand public pressures is going to be an extremely difficult thing over the next 3 to 4 months. Preparing for the finance is the biggest challenge. Long-term is not something the temporary administrator can help you with. You need to continue your economic development while providing a reasonable supply of workforce and affordable housing. Not everyone who graduates the high school and goes off to college can come back to this community. And I think that that's a real shame. That's not something I can help you with in the short term. I'm focused on COVID and money as being the biggest challenges you will face over the next 5 months.
All right. Mr. Prisby.
And again, Mr. Taranzini, you've already answered my question. This is the standard interview. Why did you leave your last position question? You've already gotten into that. We have a very detailed recitation of your history. So on behalf of myself, thank you for coming in.
Thank you for having me, Mr. Prisby.
Thank you, Mr. Taranzini, for coming in. On behalf of the board and the town, thank you for your interest. Appreciate your time tonight. And after this meeting, we will follow up.
Thank you very much for your time and for your service, and best of luck in your endeavors here. Have a good evening, folks.
Thank you. Have a great
Thank
evening.
you.
Okay. Next one will be at 8:55 from Mr. Marino. So if we want to go ahead to number 3 on our agenda, election worker for Laura D. Mambro, if I could get a motion for appointment.
I move the board vote to appoint Laura D. Mambro as an election worker.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. All those by roll call vote. Mr. Prisby.
Yeah.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, aye.
Mr. Fazio.
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Rothman.
Often, aye.
And Peter Carlson, I declare the motion carried. Thank you. You see here what else we have. You want to take new business, appoint member of select board to serve on town administrator search committee. Do you want to take that up now or do you want to wait? Ms. Roy.
Don't
I'll
we
make
have
a
to do,
Mr. Prisby, yes?
just a quick question before motions are made. Do we have to do the charge first? So we kind of putting the cart before the horse there, or no?
No, because the bylaw states a member of the select board is on there.
I move the board vote to appoint Ed Prisby to serve on the select board representative on the town administrative search committee.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Mr. Prisby.
Just quick, I'm interested in the spot, and I'll tell you why. I have a pretty fair idea of what I would be looking for, and I hope what the board would be looking for in the future town administrator. And I think it begins with a philosophy of what we're looking for, again, working backward from that goal. You're looking for an individual who is going to be the town administrator here on a permanent basis, I think, for the better part of the coming decade. And over the better part of the coming decade, as Mr. Taranzini just said, you're going to be faced with a bunch of different threats, both in the short term and the long term. Short-term threat, obviously, COVID and economic development. Long-term threat, we just got done passing our second straight override in 6 years. We know that we've got another one coming down the road unless things substantially change. So we're looking for somebody, I think, who's going to be able to deal with that, focus not only on short-term issues, the year-to-year stuff is the budget balance. Do we have a AA+ bond rating? but also the long-term stuff, which is how are we going to operate town government in the coming decade? And I'm looking for somebody who is a student of the new public administration theory of local government that emphasizes accountability as opposed to hierarchy. I'm looking for somebody who is an amazing communicator. And I would be looking for somebody who is going to be data-driven and results focused. And I think that's, you know, in my private conversations with Matt and Peter over the years, and certainly with Colleen, I think that's a pretty good indication of what we're going for. Now, as I think we'll see in these interviews, there's a lot to be said for personality too. I mean, you know, Mr. Taranzini was wonderful. You know, he was really disarming, and I found the whole conversation enjoyable. And what I loved about what he brought to the table right there was you could tell that he just bleeds public service. He did it for a bunch of years. He retired, got bored, and went back into it. You know, as we all know from just taking the slings and arrows of doing this over a number of years, that's an intangible that you can't teach, and you don't get it in grad school. You just get it over the years, and it's part of your blood. So I'd be interested in doing it. You know, we're going to have, is it 8 other people on the thing? So it's going to be a group. And we've got 150 days to get it done from the time that they meet. So, yeah, I'd love to do this.
All right, Mr. Maggio, and then Mr. Hoffman.
Mr. Chairman, through you to the board. So I don't deny at all that Mr. Prisby has a lot of knowledge and interest in doing this. I just wanted to bring up when I sort of went through all of us as a board and thinking of who would be the best person for this position, I also took into consideration just neutrality at this point too. And, and I put myself in this as well, and I think that as much as all of us have a passion for serving our community, and I think looking for the next TA, and I think I would even put out there that I think we all have a very similar vision in mind of what we're looking for at this point. But I think that Mr. Often brings a professionalism that from his private work, he's done a lot of hiring from my understanding in his job, and he brings that to the table, as well as, like I said, the sense of neutrality on the board. And I think that Ed and myself at this point are sort of, political, for lack of a better word. And, and I think Colleen would be great, but I don't know your background in hiring other people, and I think that Peter's got a pretty full plate of what we've given him as chairman. So that's kind of where I stand. I don't want to say I'm against Ed representing the board. I want to acknowledge and say that where my head was to appoint Mr. Often this evening.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Fuzzy. We have a motion made and seconded for Mr. Prisby to represent us. Mr. Often, did you have a comment? We have a 7:55. We're running a little bit behind, but
all right, I'll make my pitch briefly. So I'm very much interested in being on the search committee. I think that the majority of the board does have a good inkling of what it is that we're looking for in our next town administrator. I think I have after having just campaigned and kind of gotten the beat of what's happening in town and gotten that signal for what people are looking to change, I have a good understanding of what it is that we're looking for. I do have a significant amount of experience as well in hiring. I've hired dozens of people, and I've gone through a lot of hiring processes. I've learned a lot in that kind of repeated over and over honing of how can I get to that right mix of personality, skill set, bedside manner, all of those various things. So I guess this is an awkward thing in a discussion about somebody else being nominated, but I would very much like to be on the committee myself.
I have a motion made and second. Is there any further discussion? Ms. Roy?
Is there anything precluding the moderator from appointing a second board member?
Ms. Roy, there's a bylaw that states, the moderator is to appoint members at large of the community to essentially balance out the committee, representing its demographics. I don't have the exact quote in front of me, but that's the bylaw clearly states just one member of the select board shall be appointed. So I think the word is shall. Is there anything preventing them from appointing another board member? No, I think you would have to put your name in like everyone else, and then that would be up to the moderator. Mr. Fazio.
I think the only issue with that was that 9 is an odd number, and so having 10 in a vote, I don't think we could do that per the charter.
No, I don't think I was suggesting we add an even number 10. I think the moderator can only appoint 3 members at large. So it would have to be one of those 3 members to Ms. Roy's question. Right. All right, I have a motion made and seconded. So I just want to, anyone else have any discussion? So I just want to say, this is the search committee, guys. So they're going to be bringing back really good candidates for the 5 of us, which we're going to have to become very good at interviewing and picking our next permanent town administrator. So I am very much looking forward to that process in the search committee fulfilling its role in seeking out viable candidates and submitting for us for final adoption and appointment. So I'm encouraged by our members here wanting to participate, but I do have a motion made and seconded right now. So if there isn't any discussion, we're going to take a vote. All right, Mr. Prisby, by roll call vote.
Frisbee, aye.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, aye.
Mr. Fazio.
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Often.
Often, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. Okay, declare the motion carried 5-0. All right, thank you very much.
Bring us back someone good, Ed.
All right, so I'm going to bring in Thomas here. So everyone ready? All right. Mr. Greeno?
Good evening. I am trying to get my picture to come up for you.
Good evening. How are you tonight? Thank you for giving us a few extra minutes here.
That's okay. There we go.
All right.
Now, I have a question of the board, if I might. I am not in the normal spot that I would be in interviewing, and I have no air conditioning here, and I'm on the 2nd floor of an old cotton mill. Would you mind if I took the jacket off?
Please do.
Thank you very much. I also wanted to show you that I was wearing a full suit and not shorts underneath, so that's.
If they're Bermudas, that would get it. All right. Good evening, Mr. Greeno. Thank you very much for taking the time to interview for temporary town administrator. So what I would like to do is I'd like to open this up, just kind of tell you how we're going to do this. I'm going to open it up to you in a few minutes for some open remarks. Sure. And then we have a list of questions. We're going to go down in order and ask them. I will tell you that some of the questions may get answered, and I'll let each one of the board members make that determination if you had answered their question, and we can move on to the next one. Okay?
Very good.
All right. All right. So I'm going to give you a few minutes if you want to give some open remarks and tell us a little bit about yourself.
Sure. I'll give you the elevator pitch version as opposed to the long pitch. I have been in municipal government or something that deals with nonprofits in municipal government for a long time. I started in northern Franklin County in some really small towns as a circuit rider, moved into Central Mass for a few years, went to Vermont as an economic development director and then town manager, served on a number of regional economic development boards. Did some ADA consulting back in the day when that first came around. Did pretty well with it too. And then took the job on as the executive director of the Massachusetts Rural Development Council. I don't think we got to Grafton. We did get over to Douglas and Upton, but we didn't get to Grafton at the time. That was a 10-year ride. I thought that was the job of a lifetime. and we lost our federal funding, and I ended up taking an interim position in the town of Bourne for 90 days that lasted 14 and a half years. That ended about 10 months ago, amicably as these things can be. I still have good contact with many of the board members. And in the interim, I have been doing some interim town administration work as well as some wastewater organizational development and budgetary work for the town administrator in the town of Wareham. I am recently was offered the position in the town of Hadley, Massachusetts. We were not able to come to terms on some non-salary related items, and I am back out on the search. But this interim work, if it were to be offered, based on watching a couple of your meetings and reading the minutes of some of your meetings, would fit very nicely as I'm pursuing other alternatives and coalesce with the work that I'm doing in Wareham as well.
Okay. Thank you very much. All right. So we're going to lead off here. We've got about 13 questions to go through.
Okay.
We're going to lead off with Ms. DeFazio.
Hi, welcome, Mr. Guarino. My name's
you.
Maureen DeFazio. I'm the vice chair of the board, and I'll be asking your first question this evening. So what are the unique characteristics that you bring that would make you the best candidate to bridge the gap between our last TA and our future TA?
Sure. There's a number of things, but I think one, even though I have a little gray around the gills, I still have quite a bit of enthusiasm for the work. I love the work. I have been having to do everything from HR management in my town administrator's role to project management. I know that you have your Public Works Building Committee up and running. I don't know where that is in the process. I just have read some minutes of the meetings. I've been working on the COVID issue with the little town that I was doing interim work in, so I can kind of bridge that gap, work with your EOC, as well as your health department and your finance department on that. I have read your recent fire department report from 2019. Ms. Roy, I apologize for reaching out to you on that, but I did find it. I think I can help bridge that gap as well as you try to move forward with professionalizing that organization even more than it is. I have worked with fire departments that have had full-time and call people. So I know how that works. I know how 3 stations works. And we can get into that report if you want to later, but I have that type of thing. I have worked with assistant town administrators as well. I hired the first assistant town administrator in Bourne, who is still there. And I think I could get along well with Rebecca. I think that we would have a good working relationship. I know that you just went through your town meeting, and there was the override that passed by a little bit, but it passed. And I would want to work with your school superintendent, not on the implementation of that. He and the school committee will implement that dollars, but how we're going to help the school department roll out the school year. Is there anything that we need to do to be able to help them out with that? I want to meet with your, what I call subordinate administrative support staff as well, to be sure that, you know, people need to be comfortable at work right now. It's been a really tough time. You're open, but you're not open to the public, and you're trying to get things done, and people have been out. As this thing that we're in hopefully tries to smooth out and find some sense of normalcy, if it's over the next 4 months or so, I hope to be able to help the town guide through that and get ready for reopening if that occurs. I've been on a number of the calls with the governor and the lieutenant governor on their weekly calls, so I try to stay up to speed with that as well.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Often.
Yes, thank you for spending a little bit of time with us this evening. So this is a short term, 3 to 6 month position. I'm wondering, in this important role, what are your immediate priorities and objectives for the first 30 days?
The first 30 days, would be meet with the EOC. I want to know where you're at in your health department, where you're at relative to COVID. I want to be brought up to speed with that. I want to know how you're rolling out the FY21 budget. I think we need to stay in touch with our legislative delegation too as they move forward. They're going to close the session. And what is that going to mean when they're in conference committee? Are there any things that Grafton has up that need to be addressed? I think you need to, well, I think I would need to certainly sit down with the finance department, both the treasurer and the accountant. The treasurer, in as much as your capital is concerned, do you have any short-term bans going out on any of the capital that you're buying? Trying to keep the financial mechanisms working. I'd like to certainly sit down with some of the Council on Aging in the Recreation Department. I don't know what's happened. I can't speak to you intelligently about what's happened with the revolving funds. I imagine they're down substantially. I don't know if the override helped boost some of that or not. I haven't seen the contingent budget. I've only seen the budget that was presented for FY21 on June 20th. Those are the types of things I'd want to do. I'd want to meet with the select board. I'd want to be sure that we're following the priorities of the board. That's the key. You folks set the policy. You set the direction. I would want to talk to you about how we would work on appointments. If there were appointments that came up that were the town administrators under the charter, how do you want that addressed? Is this going to be a full authority, if you will, interim town administrator, or is it going to be something of a hybrid? And I'd want to be sure that we were all on the same page as to roles and responsibilities.
Thank you.
Mr. Brisby.
So, Mr. Garino, Ed Frisbee, very nice to meet you. As will happen in the course of our asking you questions, we've come up with about 10 predetermined questions to ask, and I think you actually just answered mine in pretty good detail. My question was, how are you going to go about the process of evaluating Grafton's present fiscal condition and beginning the FY22 budget process? I think you got part of that. As you know, this is a temporary position, but this is beginning in August, September. That might take you in pretty far into the budget process. So can you describe how you're going to come in and get your arms wrapped around this?
Sure. What I'll probably do I'm going to meet with each of the department leaders as it relates to their budget. I'm going to meet with Rebecca. Probably she and the finance director are going to be my best friends for a few, very best friends, I think, throughout the process. But what I'd like to do is take a 3-year look, take a 3-year back view of the budget, pre-override proposal and post-override proposal. One of the things I want to just digress for a second and give the town and the select board and the finance committee, I imagine too, a lot of credit for having the foresight in this override. They're not always popular, I understand that, but to take $800,000 and to put it in capital stabilization, that's a really smart thing to do. It just really is. But I want to take a 3-year look back. I want to look at the projections that I'm sure that the finance department has done going out. I want to know really from the legislature or from the MMA, what do they think is going to happen in 22? We were lucky to get level funding on Chapter 70 and on general government aid, if you will, from the state this year. But that doesn't mean that's going to happen next year if revenues stay down on the state side. So I'm going to want to take a look at that. I want to look at your revolving accounts. I want to look at your enterprise fund. I want to work with the sewer department. I know there's sewer commissioners that are separate, but I'm going to want to look at them. They seem to have quite a bit of money in their retained earnings as a percentage of budget. And I want to see what they have planned for that, what the rates are going to look like. Then put a preliminary budget together after I get the prioritization of what the select board expects in FY22.
Thank you. All right, and next up we have Ms. Roy.
You touched on this a little bit, but what concerns do you have specifically being an interim TA during this time of COVID?
I don't specifically have any concerns. I think getting up to speed on what the town has done, how they're working with their restaurants, how they're working with their nursing homes, if you have them. I came down through Grafton last Thursday and spent about an hour and a half in town, just driving the streets and doing some things. But, you know, a lot of the inspectional services that the state is supposed to take on with nursing homes and things like that have been devolved to the local inspector. And that has put an awful lot of pressure on your local staff. See how they're doing. I think we have to continue on with the CARES Act. We have to follow what the governor and the lieutenant governor are providing and work with the state agencies. I don't know if the town has thought about regionalizing a grant opportunity to help some of the small businesses through EOHCD. Some of the towns have regionalized and gone into, you know, offer low interest or sometimes deferred loans on some of the businesses. So I want to work with the Economic Development Authority as well to see what's happening there. COVID, the only thing that I think would make me a little leery as an interim, I guess, to be honest, is how am I going to be able to get up to speed with what the schools are doing? If there's any time that there needs to be a partnership between the town and the schools, and I'm sure you have it going now, it's right now. We have to have good communications, and we need to be sure that things are going to change on a daily basis. And is there something that the town or the fire inspectors or the health inspector needs to do to be able to assist them get up and going? That would have me a little, because I don't know the players.
All right. Thank you.
I hope that answered your question.
My question, do you view this temporary position for Grafton as a part or a full-time commitment until a permanent town administrator is appointed?
Well, the board had talked about, 3 days a week in some of your prior meetings. If the board wanted me here 5 days a week, I will commit to that and be full-time, full bore, and defer my work in Wareham. That's work that I can pick up later too. So it's not anything that but my understanding was that this was looking at like a 3-day endeavor. I think it needs to be more personally, at least on the front end. I've done this before and getting up to speed and doing all those things I talked about earlier. This is if selected here, you are my top priority. You are that's why I'm doing this. I'm not applying for this because I could pick up another 2 days in Wareham easily. I like doing this type of work. I'm pretty good at it. I think I'm pretty good at it. People don't last in Bourne 14 years. It just, it's a tough town. But I'm looking to be able to help you get ready for your full-time administrator. And I'll be as committed as you need me to be. If you need me there on a Sunday morning because there's something going on, I'll be there. If there's I think you'll see if the high school has I don't think they will, given what we're dealing with, but if there was a football game or if there was a play, the drama club or whatever, lacrosse or whatever, I would be at those types of events. I think it's important to be invested wherever you are.
Great, thank you. All right, Mr. Fazio.
Thank you. I think this question is pretty much answered. You've talked about a lot, that you've watched several of our meetings, and you seem to be up to speed on some of the things going on in Grafton. So my question is really, if there's any prior relationship with the town of Grafton or in central Massachusetts in particular that would help you to serve this role. Or even, I guess my other question would be to add on to that, in your hour and a half in Grafton last Thursday, you know, like what is your thought on our community, and what do you think our community's needs are?
You have a lot of new housing in town. There's a lot of new housing in town. I've worked in, not recently, I want to be clear, during my time with the Rural Development Council, I had 177 towns that I was responsible to be attentive to when necessary. And we did everything from, I won't get into what we did, but and Grafton was part of that at the time, even though you were greater than 10,000 people. It was just the way they had the geography of it. I worked in Warren for a number of years, and that was a while ago. That was when wheels were still square type thing. But I know the Commonwealth. I know every piece of the Commonwealth. And you know, someone asked me about Berkshire County the other day, and I spent some time as an HR director for the city of Pittsfield. And I can get you from anywhere from point A to point B in Massachusetts. I don't have any preconceptions of Grafton. I don't know if that was part of your question. I really don't know any folks in Grafton other than a friend of mine's ex-husband who works at WPI. But you know, I'm not coming in here with any preconceived ideas of the town. I think that what I've seen is the select board is committed. They really care about what they're doing. They don't always agree. I've seen that, but that's okay. The discussion's been respectful. And I think that I can come in here and help you. That's what I really do think I can do.
All right, thank you. Mr. Austin.
Yeah, so one of the biggest parts of this role, I think, you know, given that it's short term, is maintaining public confidence in our town operations. I'm wondering what you would do to engage internal stakeholders as well as the public to help maintain that public confidence.
Sure. I think that I've talked a little bit about what I do internally, meeting with all the different department leaders. I certainly want to go to a planning board meeting. I want to go to a conservation commission meeting. I want to hit those types of things as well to let them know that the select board is up to speed with what they're doing and they are interested in their activities, not to be interjecting themselves into their activities, but interested. Relative to outside, certainly, I think the Industrial Development Corporation, by any other name, is going to be important for me to get involved with. I want to meet with the chamber. If you have a chamber, I'm going to want to go to the Rotary and the Kiwanis and all of those different things. If there used to be a men's breakfast and a women's breakfast in Bourne every week, and if you have something like that, I'm going to want to attend those types of things as well. You know, as far as dealing with the citizenry, I would keep the same activity level that I did with Bourne, unless I was otherwise engaged in a meeting. You know, if there was something pre-scheduled. Any citizen who wanted to come in and speak with the town administrator, the door was open. You may not always be able to take care of their problem or answer their question, but what you can do is be the conduit to find out where they do need to go. And one of the things that I would also do internally, even in the short term, is be sure that even though you're closed and you're doing things by appointment, there's probably more phone calls to be sure the customer service to the citizenry is at the highest possible caliber every day, all day.
Thank you.
Mr. Prisby.
Thank you, Mr. Garino. Again, as you know, this is obviously a short-term position that is going to carry with it sort of a different flavor than that of a long-term position as permanent town administrator. How do you view the role of temporary town administrator, and how does that differ from your role as permanent town administrator if you understand the question, I mean, if you're going to be here for 5 months, you would do things differently on a permanent basis than you would on a temporary basis.
Well, I think you have to triage things a little differently than you would if you were going to be here for the long haul. I'm not going to be probably looking at your long-term capital plan 8 years out. I'm going to look at how we're going to be able to afford those expenditures in the next, fiscal year or the fiscal year thereafter. I'm not going to set long-term goals. If the select board has a long-term goal to have pink elephants on Main Street every third Sunday, starting in 2023, I'm not going to be the guy to try to take care of that. I'm going to try to triage one of the top 4 or 5 things that need to get done. The budget's going to need to get done. The town report's going to need to get started. I mean, even though it seems early, it's not. Are you going to have a special town meeting before November relative to tax rate setting and all those types of things? Those are the types of activities I think I'm going to take on while working with COVID. COVID's always there. I don't want you to think I'm forgetting about that. That's always there. But I also am going to want to be sure that the department leaders are comfortable moving ahead, and that when the baton gets handed off to your next full-time administrator, there aren't big gaps, that they don't have to go back and say, what the heck was this guy doing? Did he do anything while he was here? That's not going to be an issue for the select board nor the next town administrator.
Thank you.
Okay, Ms. Roy.
In your experience as an interim town administrator, what additional support can the board provide, if any?
Well, I think you all flipped around. You're all in different spots again. In being available, I think my ability to work with the chair, whoever the chair is, it's Mr. Carlson right now, and probably will be for the next year. I don't know how you reorganized, if you've done that yet. He and I will have a closer relationship just because he's the chair and we set agendas and we move ahead, talk about that before the agenda and packets get set up. But I would like the ability to without getting in trouble, okay, because you know how small p works, be able to call select board member Roy or select board member DeFazio or Mr. Often on what do you think, and Mr. Prisby, what do you think about this? And not to set my mind on how to make it work forward, but just to be sure that we're all walking the same path. One of the things that I will tell you though, and sometimes to my detriment, if Mr. Prisby, we'll pick on him for a minute, were to say, you know, I'd really like you to go over to South Street and take care of the problem with the tree that's may or may not be in our right of way. Yeah, I'm not touching that. And that's going to come before the select board or the Public Works Committee or the DPW director. I'm not going to take direction from one board member to do something. If there's something that comes up, I will say that needs to get a vote of the board. I know I bounced around Willie's barn on that one a little bit, but I think it's important to know when I come in there, if I come in there, it's going to be transparent and people are going to know what I'm doing and everybody's going to know what I'm doing at the same time.
Okay. All right, thank you. So my question, so upon appointment of a new permanent town administrator, how would you handle the transition? Like how much time would you require to assist with the new permanently appointed town administrator?
People seem to think that there needs to be like weeks on end to do a handoff, and it's really like a couple of hours to go through. Here are the 5 or 6 priority items that you want to be working on. This is what I've done with them. Because you have an assistant town administrator too, that makes that handoff a little easier as well. Because the assistant town administrator is going to be involved with just about a lot of the things that I will be doing, so that there isn't a gap and I'm not reinventing the wheel on something that's already been done. I think to be available for consult, I think if you work with that person for a full day, although you might think it's too short, it really isn't. We get in each other's way and we have our own style of doing business. And then be available for consult to come in. I've got a problem with this. Can you come spend an hour with me on that? And you can set that up and do it. I'm willing to spend as much time as necessary, but I don't think you need a huge block of time. Whoever you're going to hire, this is a professional town. You know, it's a town that has a good reputation throughout the Commonwealth. The person you're going to hire is going to be a pro, and they're going to know what they need to do.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Fazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This question was pretty much answered already, but the question referred to, have you ever served as a temporary TA before, which, you know, looking at your resume, obviously, and then also what you've talked about. But is there any other experience that you'd like to add to share with the board of your experience as a temporary TA?
Sure. I also it's not on the resume because, again, it was a long time ago. I served as the interim in Ashburnham for several months back. It was a while ago, but I did that as well. There's a couple of things that I think I may bring to the table that perhaps, I don't know what the experience is of some of the others that may be coming in tonight. I've done an awful lot of project management. I've done a lot of capital project management, building 2 new schools. One I was intimately involved with, and one I was peripherally involved with. Building a new DPW facility. Yeah, we had our community center flood out. That was $1 million renovation we had to do there. So I have a lot of capital project experience. I have some good economic development experience too, if you need that right now. You know, we've done a lot. We did a lot in Bourne, done a huge amount in Bourne. And I can get those plans going. I'm good at prioritization. I'm good at work plans and schedules and adhering to those schedules, and letting you know if there's a hiccup in the schedule, why. And I have, I think, a little bit of maturity. Again, that may be because of this, but there's been good times and hard times as a town administrator, and I've taken a couple of good blocks to the chop as well over time, and I don't get rattled. I'm not going to get rattled. There's not a whole lot that can set me off. I have a pretty good personality, and I get along with the people that I work with. I think if you were to call Bourne to a T, with the exception of one, I had a real good relationship with my department leaders and my subordinate staff, and I hire pretty well. If there's a need, for some reason you come into a problem with a hire, my HR experience, as well as in Bourne over my tenure, I brought in all new department leaders save one, because we got through this tsunami of retirements and we had to bring people in. So I'm pretty good at hiring, and I'm not afraid to fire if that needs to be done too. Progressive discipline and all the things that go with it. If you know, I would call the chief of police in Bourne if you had any questions, certainly.
Thank you. Mr. Hoffman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So based on what you know about Grafton, what do you see as our biggest challenges immediately? And how do you think you can help address those challenges?
Well, some of them are long-term, so I'm going to kind of leave those to the side as I saw them. I think, you know, traffic's going to become more problematic. I think your fire department report needs to be implemented. I don't think you can waste time on that. You're a town of 18,000 people with a overall call department. And that's fine. It works for you. Okay, I'm not criticizing it. But I think a lot of the things in those reports should be done. You should be invoicing insurance companies for motor vehicle accidents. You should be bringing in that revenue. And I was surprised that you weren't. That's just one little piece of it that I caught. But I think you need, and I know there was some questions about the position description and how that came to be for the full-time chief. You know, I can't go backwards on that, but I do think you need to start implementing that. I think that's very important to the town. It's going to make a big difference in people's insurance rates too. Homeowners insurance rates on how you have this structured. And you know, we always try to do the best we can on the taxpayer. You know, I think I've hit a lot of these things before, but certainly the school department and how we roll the new school year out and how we can be helpful to that is important without being intrusive. I think getting the budget up and running, getting the department leaders to, I don't want to sound like the Pied Piper, but to follow what we're doing over the next 4 to 5 months to be sure that the next person who comes in without any major road potholes, if you will. You know, I can talk to you about traffic. I can talk to you about regional planning. I can talk to you about your assessment for the regional transportation. All those types of things I could talk to you about, but that's not something I think you're going to want me to spend lots of hours on in a 150-day period.
Appreciate that. Thank you.
Okay. All right, we're coming up on our last question here. We have to hurry up and get to our next one. Mr. Prisby, you have the last question.
Thank you, Mr. Greeno. Thanks for your time this evening. I get the very last and very standard job interview question, which is, why did you leave your last position?
I'm going to give you the unvarnished truth. It had been going downhill. I had 13 really good years in Bourne, and I had 18 months of toughness, and we'll leave it at that. I had, this public session?
Yes.
Okay. I just want to be sure. The last couple of years were tough. For 9 years, I had one member of the board that was nipping at my heels. And we all came to the realization, and it was an amicable realization, that small p politically, it wasn't going to be successful anymore. And we worked out an agreement. I stayed there. I had a 90-day transition. I helped them during the transition. My contract ended on June 30th, and they asked me to stay through September 30th to be able to help. And it was very positive. So I don't want to say things were all roses and, you know, lollipops. They weren't, but 13 of those 14 and a half years were really good, and we got a lot done. So, you know, if you can stay 14 years in a community, I think you have done a pretty decent job.
Thank you for your candor on that answer. Appreciate it.
No, I could get more candorous, if you will, but we're public. So, but no, it was actually pretty good overall. You know, I was fortunate to be able to be there. I learned a lot. I grew a lot professionally as well.
All right. Well, I want to thank you very much for coming in this evening and appearing before us and answering questions, giving introductions. at this point in time, we're going to move on to the next part of our agenda, but I want to thank you for your time again, and I will be following up with you after this meeting this evening on our decision. Thank you very much for coming in.
Thanks for your time. It was very pleasurable. I appreciate you having me in.
Likewise. Thank
Have
you.
a good night now.
All right, bye. Okay, next up, we have Nina Nazarian. Just waiting to see if she's in the participants here. I'm not seeing her in here quite yet. All right. Oh, here we go. I think we've got it.
Well, that's an unfortunate carryover.
Hi, how are you?
Good evening.
Good. Thank you for taking the time and meeting with us tonight. Just want to confirm the name on your Zoom. Is it someone else's?
Yes, I was actually trying to update it. It's my brother-in-law's, but I couldn't seem to find the ability to do that without his information and or without being logged on. I'm just going to change that right now.
Okay.
Thank you for bringing that to my attention.
Wonderful. All right, thank you very much. Pronounce it Nazarian, is that correct?
Yes. Mhm.
Thank you for coming out tonight. My name is Peter Carlson, the chair of Grafton Select Board, and coming out tonight and answering some questions regarding temporary town administrator position for the town of Grafton. We have a list of about 13 questions that we're going to go in order from each one of the members. I neglected to do this before, but I want to give each one of the members to introduce themselves before we get into you and you give an introduction and we go into the questions. So I want to start with Ms. Roy.
Hi, my name is Colleen Roy. I'm the clerk of the Grafton Select Board. I want to thank you for taking time out of your evening to interview with us tonight.
Thank you.
Mr. Fazio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Hi, Ms. Nazarian. Thank you so much for joining us this evening. My name is Doreen DeFazio, and I'm the vice chair of the board.
Thank you for having me.
Mr. Prisby.
Hi, Ed Prisby here. Very nice to meet you. Thanks for coming in.
Same here. Thanks.
And Mr. Lofton.
Ms. Nazarian, it's nice to meet you. Welcome to our meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Zarian, so I want to give you a few minutes to give an introduction, and upon the conclusion of that, we'll get into some of the questions that the board has already prepared for tonight's meeting. So I'm going to hand the floor over to you.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Thank you all for inviting me in this evening to speak with you and spend some time for you to get to know me a little bit. As you know, my name is Nina Nazarian, and I have a career history in municipal local government, which I love and enjoy very much, which you all know from your own work. In my most recent role, I was working for the town of Littleton, but recently separated with them effective this past week. And currently I'm here at my sister's house, spending some time with my niece and my nephew. And so that's why I'm on my brother-in-law's computer. A little bit about me. I was working with the town of Littleton for a little over a year. The work there was wonderful. The community was wonderful. But the board and I really found ourselves in a situation where we weren't a good fit. And so we agreed to mutually separate. I did, but prior to that, spend about 4 years as the town administrator for the town of Princeton, which conveniently is in the Worcester County, as you all are. And it gave me a significant appreciation for the work that goes on in that area and in central Massachusetts as a whole. I have a lot of connections to other town administrators and many of your elected officials in that area that I had the opportunity and pleasure to work with over my time in Princeton, and really had a tremendous experience there. Also, prior to that, I worked for the town of Tingsboro as the assistant town administrator, where I had the pleasure of working with a number of folks who were working on some exciting projects there, including a major sewer project and a lot of diverse issues. As you all know, every community is different. Your community is going to be very different from the communities I've worked in, but those are some of the exciting things that draw me to assisting you all in this transitionary period. And you know, as far as my prior experience is concerned, before that, I was a public works engineer. My bachelor's degree was in civil engineering, which I enjoyed very much. I did find myself in a kind of an interesting situation where I enjoyed the civil engineering quite a bit, but I found that I really enjoyed the public service component of it more than I enjoyed, quite frankly, the engineering component. So that's what led me to go for my master's in public administration and make the wonderful long-term connections that I've made in our membership and our association that have been a tremendous benefit, and which I serve on a number of different committees in our association, the Massachusetts Municipal Managers Association. And as far as my approach to the job, I mean, I thrive on showcasing the great things that local government does. It's just, as you all know, if you haven't participated or if you haven't, you know, been immersed in that world, it's hard to understand what's going on. So when someone calls us for the first time, it's really important that they have as good of an experience as possible. We're not always able to answer the question the way they want the question answered or what they're hoping for, but at least we can explain the reasoning and we can explain how, you know, we may be limited in our abilities, whether it's within our domain or not within our domain. So I really take the time to explain those types of things. And I also try to showcase very generously any good work done by staff and departments and boards and committees, the good work and time that's spent by the select board. We all know that your time is not just showing up at these meetings. You do a lot more work behind the scenes that sometimes never gets seen or understood. So I like to put those areas in front so that people can see them. I believe myself to be a very big team player, and you know, as I said before, I'm really excited by the opportunity to assist Grafton in this probably difficult time.
All right, thank you very much. I appreciate the intro. And we're going to start off with Mr. Fazio.
Thank you again, Mr. Chairman. So Ms. Nazarian, you've sort of started to answer this question a little bit in your introduction, but I'll ask it so you can add on anything that you'd like. What are the unique characteristics that you bring that would make you the best candidate to bridge the gap between our last TA and our future TA?
Absolutely. So that is a good question. I have, you know, there are a number of areas where I find that I have a tremendous amount of experience. I see that the town of Grafton does not have a finance director position, and I understand that the town administrator, especially by a number of the different aspects in the charter, is responsible for the development of the budget, and is obvious based on the timing of the year, there would be a component of budget development or beginning of budget development for the fiscal 2022 budget. And so, you know, I'm very comfortable in the development of the budget process, although the town of Littleton did have a finance director and who serves in a very strong capacity and role. I was able to be hands-off and focus on other areas during my time there. But in the town of Princeton, the community didn't have any of that staffing, and that responsibility fell on the shoulders of the town administrator. Certainly happy to report that developed a number 4 or possibly 5 budgets during the time that I was there that were very successful and with no issues. And so budgeting won't be a challenge for me. I mean, certainly Grafton is a larger community than Princeton was, but quite frankly, some of those aspects are just very interesting and exciting opportunities, but it's not materially different from the budgeting and the size of Littleton in terms of its budget more than its number of residents. And so as far as that major component, which I see as a large area that needs to kind of be moved through in a way that is, unified and consistent with the expectations of the board and the goals of the town, I think that will be a perfect fit. I know that I will bring in the opportunity and open door kind of policies. I really believe in having people have access and being able to reach me at any time. I'd love to reach you all at any time. I mean, with respecting, of course, the times you'd like me to reach you and work with you. But I'd like you to feel you can reach me at any time. I really am looking to give 110% into this position if I'm selected so that I can make your lives as easy as possible. I know that you deal with a lot of things that are not always easy. And I realize that this next period of time is going to take a considerable amount of your attention. And so helping provide you communication the way you'd like to see it, provide you with information the way it's going to be easy for the board to have at hand and be informed, and also to just keep things going so that you can all focus your attention as much as possible on the areas that you'd like to move forward during the transitional time, and also the next filling of the position, the most important component. I hope I answered your question.
Thank you. Okay, next up we have Mr. Often.
Yes, thank you. I'm wondering, so this is a short-term, 3 to 6 month position. It's an extremely important role. I'm wondering what your immediate priorities and objectives are just for the first 30 days. So, you're going to hit the ground running. What are your immediate priorities?
Sure, thank you. Well, I would like the opportunity to meet with you all at whatever is appropriate or best for you. One-on-one meetings would be ideal. If you'd like to do it in groups, we can certainly do that. If you prefer a public meeting, that's certainly an option. However you want to approach that, but getting to know you all and getting to know what you're looking for during this period of time is probably the highest important item for me to kind of get a clear understanding of where you'd like to be for that period of time. Obviously, wanting to get to know the staff to the extent that's practical, and also boards and committees so that they know that they can reach out to me. I have always really developed a contact list of department heads and, of course, board chairs, and now that you've probably gone through most of your appointments and transition for boards, there's a pretty clear chair most likely, and being able to reach out to those folks and having an understanding of what they're working on and some of their goals, especially as they relate to the select board's goals, and any way that I can help foster the period of time you described to keep things moving along in the direction that the community would like to go. So it's really a lot of getting to know what's going on so that I'm putting my efforts in areas that the board would like to see prioritized.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Next up, Mr. Prisby.
Thank you. Hi again, Ms. Nazarian. My question relates to your term here, potentially over the course of the next 5 months or so. We're going to be beginning in late August, maybe early September, and moving through early December into January. How are you going to go about the process of evaluating Grafton's present fiscal condition and beginning the FY22 budget process?
That's a great question, and I appreciate the detail orientation of that. I'm going to attempt to not be too detailed about my answer. I think one of the first places I would start, really, quite frankly, is some of the reporting that the town does to the state. There is a number of different reports. Some of them are not as important for a deep dive as others may be for my review, but one in particular is the tax rate recap, and it shows a number of the different, expenditures, what the areas are. It breaks down the town meeting details. It breaks down the amount that's been transferred in or out of stabilization funds and in or out of revolving and the like funds. So that's just a critical report for me to review in depth and understand, just kind of the flow. But also really getting a look back at some of the historical numbers, a 3-year look back on trends as far as spending is concerned, as far as revenues are concerned. And I have taken a look briefly at your most recent bond rating. Things look very positive there, but I recognize, as anyone does, that we are in a area that's been uncharted and unknown, and we have a lot in front of us that we need to sort out as far as the pandemic is concerned and what the economic impacts will be as a result of the pandemic. So, it's really going to be a look at that, obviously working very closely with staff who have been integral to the development of the budget. The financial team, the town's treasurer, the town's accountant, although you may be looking for an accountant right now, I might have seen that. I'm not sure where you stand on that process, but the town's collector and the assessor's office, and understanding what the assessor's office is working on. I'm not sure if it's a reevaluation year, because those components will play a big part in the development of the fiscal 22. And I probably jumped over one of the most important things is the discussion with the select board and the finance committee on what the expectations are and what you're looking for departments to adhere to for the upcoming budget, providing some of that guidance that is going to be necessary as we ask departments to, as we hopefully as a team ask departments to develop budgets for their fiscal 22 requests.
Thank you. Ms. Roy.
What concerns do you have becoming an interim TA in this time of COVID?
That's an interesting one. I don't really have concerns. I would say that there are areas that I am focused on working through, for instance, safety of employees, safety of the public. I realize that your town hall is currently open for appointments. And, the question is whether or not the town hall should remain to be open by appointment only, or if town hall should be opened with, limited hours, or if town hall should just be opened altogether. What infrastructure there is in place to ensure the safety of not only the employees in town hall, but of the public entering town hall. So I think it's more of a mechanical area that comes to my mind. Longer term, it's the area of, is there presumably a spending freeze currently to ensure that the community isn't going to, make purchases for areas that it may not need in the future as a result of the pandemic and some of the changing environment that we can only do so much to predict. But it's mostly a matter of ensuring the safety of the employees, the safety of the community as a whole, and, furthering discussions as needed and facilitating any discussions if needed with the Board of Health. I did participate in a number of discussions with the Littleton Board of Health, and we worked as a team to discuss areas, especially when this pandemic was first evolving and we were trying to learn more and more about what was going on and, how the virus was transmitted, which we have a much greater understanding today than we did, obviously, when the pandemic first began. So I don't know if I answered your question, but if you have any follow-ups, I'm happy to answer them. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, my question. Do you view this temporary position as a part or full-time commitment until a permanent town administrator is appointed?
I think it really depends on what you all are looking for. I'm more than happy to commit full-time to the position. I really, I have that flexibility at this point. You know, there are certain areas of time, that I would have to give in any normal position, that may be weekend work, that may be obviously evening work. So, probably more than full time, but it really depends on what you all are looking for. And I'm flexible in any direction, and I'm happy to have a conversation. I do want to obviously ensure the success of the community and the board as a whole. So, I think it's just further discussion probably be needed, but I'm more than flexible.
Thank you. All right, Mr. Fazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the next question is if you have any prior relationships with the town of Grafton, not necessarily people, but just working regionally, maybe with the town of Grafton, with your experience in Princeton, that would help you serve in this role, or, if not, what you know about the community, or, your experience working in central Massachusetts overall.
Okay, excellent. So as a former town administrator, CMRPC regional agency. So I worked closely with a number of folks at CMRPC, and I'm I would say very well acquainted with the leadership over there. I have a number of familiarities or acquaintanceships with a number of town administrators and managers in central Massachusetts. After leaving Princeton, I wanted to maintain the ties that I had to those folks. And so I asked to remain on their email distribution list. So I was kind of the only non-central Mass town administrator on their email list, and, go back and forth and hear about some of the questions that were going on between different communities. And it certainly proved to be very helpful, and the managers in the area are phenomenal. So having the opportunity to kind of look around to what they're doing in developed relationships, where I know I can just really pick up the phone and call and ask the questions I have, is a huge asset, I think, and a huge help to me so that I can help the community. I also, obviously, as you probably know, hired your prior town planner in the town of Littleton, and he is doing a phenomenal job there. And I know he's carrying a lot of water, but I always have, him and potentially others to begin the development of a relationship with the staff and officials in the community, so that I can, try to hit the ground running as much as possible.
Great, thank you. Mr. Austin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we're transitioning from a long-term town administrator. Maintaining public confidence in our town operations obviously is a really important part of this role. I'm wondering, what would you do to engage internal stakeholders as well as the public to achieve the objective of, maintaining that public confidence?
Absolutely. So you had mentioned, Mr. Often, I think, internal and external stakeholders, correct?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. So, internal stakeholders, I don't want to say it will be easy, because there's a lot of folks, I'm sure, that are doing a lot of work that I, will only get a chance to see some of, especially in the initial term of the time that I would hope to be in Grafton. But internal is a little bit easier than the external component. So I think I certainly don't want to put it on the board, but in part, asking the board how you would like to approach external stakeholders is the first thing I might request from you all. I'd be glad to provide some ideas of how we might do that. Some communities have the town administrator prepare, a written summary on a regular basis of things that are going on. I do tend to have and find a lot of benefit from holding regular meetings with department heads, so that I can cross-communicate information that's been discussed at the select board meeting, and allow them the opportunity to share information with one another, whether it be in that setting or just to foster and encourage that. I'm sure it's already going on, but to try to build that on that further. And so, it really, written communications is one way to do it. I know that some communities like to have, the town administrator.
No.
She froze.
Zoom was working so well all night. We'll just give her a few minutes. Yeah, I'd say the other week I once spoke for 4 minutes during a work Zoom meeting and had no idea that it was frozen on my end and kept talking for 4 minutes and didn't realize it until I got a text message on my phone.
That's shocking.
Hi. I was just trying to log on from my phone. Oops, there we go. Now I have to get out of my phone. Sorry about that. I don't know where you stopped hearing me because I could hear you at some point, but I realized you couldn't hear me. I think I was probably discussing, televised discussion, presentations to the community about what's going on, and it may have frozen shortly after that. So, really a lot of it truly depends on, what you believe to be, the community a lot better than I probably ever will as a temporary town administrator, but I certainly will do my best. But relying on some of what you would provide as guidance would be very helpful in terms of how we keep the external stakeholders engaged. And it's not really how I would do it, obviously, it's how we would do it. I know some communities have done updates from the select board. Maybe it's something that's drafted by me and provided to you all that you can edit, that you put out. It really depends, really truly depends on how you'd like to engage the public.
Thank you.
Mr. Brisby.
Thank you. So Mrs. Arian, you've fielded a number of questions from us so far. These are all questions that we're asking of everybody, and to a degree, you've already answered a little bit of what I'm about to ask you, but I asked this question of everybody, so I've got to ask it of you. Obviously, the role of temporary town administrator is different than one of a permanent town administrator. How do you see those two roles differing in the time that you're going to be here?
So, I see, first and foremost, I acknowledge the town's charter, which recognizes that there is an important differentiation between a permanent town administrator and a temporary town administrator, and only gives a certain amount of responsibility or authority to the temporary town administrator, with the understanding that, a temporary role is just that. It's temporary, and it should not necessarily define or bind the community long term without somebody who is seated in that position and working on a longer term plan with the select board. So I recognize that there are major differences between, appointment responsibilities and, there's really temporary appointments and emergency appointments to that extent. The other thing is, as we think about what the board wants to accomplish, I think probably every discussion or a good number of them might want to be, hand in hand with, is this something that we should take on now? And I'd be more than happy to take it on if, the board would like to take it on. But is this something more suited for a discussion when there is a long-term position person secured in the position? So, you might change some policies depending upon the need that the board has. If there is a policy that absolutely has to change and the board is, feels very strongly about it, could be easily changed. You may also wait until certain policies are changed. And, that's something that I would recommend we discuss wherever practical. And so there is a tremendous difference between the two roles, and I want to be very mindful of those things. And so I welcome, you know, the discussion points at any time, so that I'm not, you know, so that the board and I are often collectively, as the six of us, would be having the opportunity to have discussions on what is the proper timing of this, because timing means a lot. And I know you all have probably come to find that in your careers and your lives. So, you know, that's timing is key in response to your question, I think.
Great. Ms. Roy.
So I believe you've touched on this one as well. In your experience as an interim TA, what additional support can the board provide to ensure a smooth transition, if any?
You're asking, I'm sorry, just quick clarification. You're asking what the board can provide. Is that correct? Or what okay. Well, certainly as far as providing assistance, you know, to me, if you select me for the opportunity to have those, you know, meetings with you and to hear from you on what's important to you and some, you know, your priorities for this term, understanding, you know, some of the basics, you know, what does your schedule, what is the best time to reach you? How do you like to be reached? Would you prefer that I send, you know, an email, a text, a call, whatever the case may be? Tell me what your preferences are, and I can meet those. Usually I don't have a problem. I'm available at any time for the most part. And, you know, if there are documents that you specifically think that I might not be aware of, that you think are going to be really beneficial for me to read, hearing from the board as a whole is helpful. Hearing from individuals is helpful. You know, of course, I will go and continue to do a tremendous amount of reading on my own and learn more and more about the community as I try to dive into all the things you guys have been doing for so long. But kind of getting a sense from you all if there are specific areas that you think I need to know about, especially as we take on items or subjects to keep furthering throughout the transitionary period. So if there's anything written in particular that would be helpful, or any specific contacts that I should reach out or meet with, those are going to be beneficial.
All right. My question here. So upon appointment of a new permanent town administrator, how would you handle the transition for that new appointment such time when it comes? So we could bring on the new town administrator, you know, how would you envision a transition occurring?
So depending, I think it really depends on the level of experience that the incoming person has. You know, it's often said that town administrators don't really, you know, it doesn't help to have two cooks in the kitchen, so to speak. So, you know, I don't want to be stepping on anyone's toes as you're looking to transition. If the town administrator would like, you know, some time being spent, that's great. If the board would like time being spent to create an overlap, that's great. I'm also happy to step aside. Creating, you know, a listing of things that are currently going on is something that I've done in the communities during my transition. You know, in Princeton, we had a tremendous lengthy document that was developed so that, you know, each member of the board had an update of where each item was. And I developed something similar to that in my transition in Littleton, and providing that to the next town administrator, going over that document with the next town administrator, answering any questions that they have, obviously being available to answer questions long after the transition has occurred. I'd be more than happy to do that. Quite frankly, you know, service in this particular field is that we as managers are looking for the positive, the continued positive work of local governments. And, you know, as a member, as an active member of the Massachusetts Municipal Managers Association, I want to ensure that you guys have everything you need, and I always want to be accessible to you, and will remain accessible to any other community who has a question on something that I worked on or something that they think I can assist with moving forward.
All right, Mr. Fazio.
Thank you. We've sort of already covered this. My question that was read to the other candidates as well is, have you ever served as a temporary TA before, and what was your experience like? So I know you don't have experience per se in just taking a temporary role, but you've talked a lot about your transitions out of these, which I think are very valid as well. So if you wanted the opportunity to add on to any of that experience at this time.
Sure.
Great.
So the only additional piece of information that I feel is relevant in this situation is the fact that when I was in the town of Tingsboro, I had the opportunity to serve as the assistant town administrator there, but at the time there was a transition in the position of town administrator, and I served as acting town administrator. So while acting town administrator and interim town administrator and temporary town administrator may all be similar things, honestly, I think my understanding is that the term of the work really defines it. But of course, in the case of Grafton, your charter defines it. It defines it as temporary, so it's temporary. And it also defines an acting scenario. I did that acting position in Tingsboro. Maybe a different name would have been more appropriate. I don't know as though the title really truly matters, but it was for a period of 4 months. And, it was my responsibility to assist the community in, maintaining, pace and the course, and also to assist the incoming town administrator. I had not applied for the position at the time. Assist the town administrator with the transition, which I did, and, provide the community with a solid footing moving forward.
Okay. Thank you. Mr. Alton?
Sure. So based on what you know about Grafton, what do you see as our biggest challenges immediately, and how does your experience help to address those challenges?
So I do see, as kind of I alluded to earlier, I think one of the biggest challenges that almost every government, probably worldwide, is facing is the issue of the economy, their respective economies, and how that will impact their services and how that will impact their ability to provide, the continued services that they have. We don't truly know what to expect from this pandemic in terms of the economic impact, but there are indicators that are showing us different things at this time. And the part of the question is, we only have part of the graph shown at this point. We don't know what the rest of the graph shows. So I do think that the finances and the economy are going to be a very large component. That's really something that's partly on the shoulders of the temporary town administrator, but to a significant extent, obviously, on the shoulder of the future town administrator working with the board and the finance committee. But it does provide an opportunity for us to do a little bit of review on what is currently, where the town is currently spending funds, and what areas, need to be prioritized, especially as we look at the development of the next fiscal year's budget. And, how, assuming you have a spending freeze, how that spending freeze is going, and what areas should we look into for, options to either regionalize, or regionalization, let me just stop there and say, has pros and cons. So, looking at each scenario in a way that makes sense is really important. But, are there opportunities for spending less? Is there a need to spend more now so that we spend less later, whether it be for infrastructure improvement or otherwise? Just kind of combing through and seeing what we can do to ensure that we're as good a track as possible. Then the other component is obviously economic development. I realize that that's a difficult task in most communities in non-pandemic land, so to speak, but even more difficult in the world we're currently in. There are a tremendous number of different business opportunities presenting themselves, and understanding what those trends are, learning about those trends, keeping our ear on the ground for that, and trying to figure out if there's an opportunity to bring, businesses into Grafton to the extent that the community and the board would like to do so, what those would look like, what format they would take, what types of businesses would be of interest, and do those fit with the types of businesses that are expanding today in this pandemic. And then trying to figure out what the future of those look like too, which will be particularly hard as well. So, there's a there's a litany of issues, and a lot of that has to do with the great, sounding boards and work that is done by the state, and listening to what they're projecting, listening to what especially some of our communities to our east would be seeing, because often they start to see it a little bit before communities further west or in the central part of the state do, and trying to grab onto those opportunities before they're scooped up too far. Obviously, grant opportunities. So I looked at, again, the bond rating, and ensuring that the town can continue to have the positive bond rating that it has is going to be pretty important, and looking to project out. So I don't know if there are potentially policies that could be reviewed. Again, I don't know that large policy changes would be ideal in the time of a temporary town administrator, but that wouldn't affect us, wouldn't harm us in looking at options that the board could consider and discuss when a permanent town administrator is selected.
Thank you.
Okay. And follow up here, Mr. Prisby with the last question.
Thanks for coming in, Mrs. Arian. I have the pleasure of asking the dreaded job interview question that everybody got here. Why did you leave your last position?
Yeah, well, I planned for that one. So truly, it wasn't a good fit, and it wasn't, the job wasn't what I expected. I think that there was a difference in understanding as to the position. And so, it was best for the board and I to agree. I did have a transition with them, as we were working towards, a mutual separation. I did continue to work for the town. And after the separation agreement was signed, I continued to work for the town to the time in which, the board had identified for a amicable transition. And I will say on that, though, that it's important to look at some of my historical experience and look at what I believe to be a very good reputation that I had in Princeton, quite frankly, still a very good reputation in Littleton. Regardless of this transition, I could easily provide references of appropriate officials in any of the communities that I worked in. I could make a very long list, but you just tell me what you're looking for, and I'll give you a shorter list so that you can do some of the homework that you may want to do.
Thank you.
All right. Well, Ms. Nazarian, thank you very much for coming in this evening. I want to thank you for your time and your very thoughtful answers and answering our questions this evening. We're going to go through and begin our discussion, and I will be getting back to you either late tonight or first thing in the morning about what direction we're going to take. But I want to, again, thank you for your time.
Great. Thank you all very much. I really appreciated this opportunity, and I wish you all the best. And I look forward to speaking with you, Chairman Carlson. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay.
Good evening.
Good evening. All right. Okay. All right. So that concludes our interview. We only had 3 candidates tonight. I know we had a 4th one that dropped out today for consideration. I just want to thank everybody for the thoughtfulness in putting the questions together and getting them in a manageable way to ask them tonight. I thought the times were pretty spot on when you guys picked 40-45 minutes per candidate. I was like, okay, but it seemed to be pretty spot on. So I want to thank you all for your questions. All right, we want to open it up to discussion. Mr. Prisby.
We got 3 good candidates. I mean, that's a load off my mind. So I have 2 favorites at this point, and just going through my notes, I wrote down the answers to every question that we asked for each of them, and I thought each one of them said something that made me really think about the question that we had asked. For Taranzini, he said something that had been in the back of my mind, and I think I said it at the last meeting. I was looking for somebody who could come in and give us an honest evaluation of where we stood. Somebody who had experience, who had done this before, and would be able to come in quickly, wrap his arms around where the town is, and be able to provide that sort of analysis. I circled and starred that he agrees that the budget is the single biggest policy document that we have every year. Like we always say, you show me your budget, I'll tell you your priorities. Again, in the past, there hasn't been, I think, enough emphasis on that. And the idea that both Mr. Garino and Mr. Taranzini said, you want to talk with us about what our priorities are, that's refreshing. So I really enjoyed that. I honestly like the fact that no one here had particular Grafton connections. They're going to be here for 3 months. We do have a dedicated staff and no shortage of people to tell them about Grafton, I feel like. And I think in my mind, it comes down to 2 different feelings that I got from both Garino and Taranzini. One, from Mr. Taranzini, just an immediate feeling of comfort that he had done this before. This is what he does. He's sort of not somebody that's transitioning from a permanent role as a career move to doing this, but rather he retired, loves doing this, and he loves coming in to help out organizations like ours in their time of need. And that experience that he has really shown through in his interview. Frankly, I wasn't sure about him when I read his resume with the line, not quite sure how a 4-month interim gig turned into this long term, but ... I was like, well, that's sort of an unconventional way to begin a cover letter and a resume, but it really works for him because that's his personality. He's not necessarily conventional. I think with Garino, there's just a guy who, maybe this is the technocrat in me, I feel like he really knows his stuff. He recognized immediately our goal for the stabilization and lauded us on that. He recognized immediately that having to work with the schools, even though we're on the municipal side of the budget, during COVID was something that should be a goal for the next 4 months. Recognizing right away that customer service and phone calls when the building's closed is enormous. It's just enormous to be able to build public confidence. And not for nothing, not taking direction from individual community members is that's good. I don't want somebody who's going to come in here, get pushed around by somebody influential and say, this is what we do here. No, that's not what he wants to do. Both of those guys are really experienced. I like Mrs. Zarian. I feel like she maybe ought to apply for the permanent gig because I feel like that's, given her answers, I feel like that's where she's at. That's just a feeling that I got. But I would be perfectly happy with either Mr. Garino or Mr. Taranzini.
Thank you, Mr. Brisby. Anyone else have any discussion? Mr. Often.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I will immediately, I guess, agree with that in terms of Mrs. Arian. Seemed like a lot of her answers were geared more towards a permanent position. She doesn't have as much experience in the interim position. So while I really liked some of her answers, she seemed really very earnest about the customer service aspect of, like, I've got an open door policy and I just want somebody to like rock up to my desk and like just feel heard. That was such a refreshing thing to hear. I loved that. But a lot of her other answers were, a little bit rambling, a little bit textbook maybe. And she seemed like she was more she actually mentioned something about this first stage of working with Grafton, and that was a bit of a red flag for me. So if you want to apply for the town administrator position, then that's the position you should be going for. I feel like this board's been pretty clear about what we want. I really liked Carter. I thought, he's worked in a number of different environments. He seemed really passionate about the role. His resume looks like a bit of a fixer. And I think that's good. It, to me, kind of demonstrates that he likes to get his hands dirty a little bit, likes to dig in and kind of just get involved. I like that aspect of some of the answers that he was providing. I liked the fact that he brought up the CARES Act money and kind of accounting for that and looking after that and looking to leverage that as much as possible. That's one of those things that this town, it's a unique thing that's happening right now. The only concern, I guess, that I had with him that I really liked about Mr. Guarini was he didn't seem to have done his research, right? So Guarini came in and he talked pretty eloquently about the fire department and all of that. And I really liked that he clearly had done his homework and was just kind of prepared for this interview. I guess my top vote certainly would be for Mr. Taranzini. So that's what I have to say.
Thank you, Mr. Hoffman. Mr. Pazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yeah, I mean, I'm agreeing with my board members exactly. So I'll start with the last interview. I think Ms. Nazarian will make a great full-time TA. I think out of the three candidates, although I think all candidates were solid for our finalists. I think that she would be well suited for a full-time role. And I felt like some of her answers were, I don't want to say appeasing to the board, but I feel like, it's more like this ramp up of getting ready and, kind of understanding the community, talking to people, coming up and Mr. Taranzini in particular, I feel like he just knows how to hit the ground running. And instead of, I think, it's important for the person who's going to bridge this gap, just comes in and, how do I want to say this? Just, already sort of has a direction in mind. And I got the sense that he did. And some of the things he said, and Ed mentioned a lot of them, the critical deadlines of fall town meeting, CARES dollars, FY21 audits. I like how he talked about being an agent to the board. I really like how he talked about quarterly reports and managing things as teams and instead of staff. I really liked his style, and he seems to just have a lot of good. I think I feel confident about interpersonal relationships and things like that with staff, because I feel like this is what he does. And I think that in a 3 to 6 month job, that we need someone who's going to come in and just hit the ground running. And so I didn't feel that much in the last candidate, although I felt like she would be very qualified for a full-time job. And yeah, I mean, Mr. Guarino too, I thought he was an enthusiastic candidate, and I did like what he said about our fire department. And I also, he mentioned a few of our staff members by name. And I will say too, that I like that all three candidates didn't have any connection to Grafton. I think that's a positive. It was kind of like a twisted question of, why are you applying here, and see if anyone knew. And I like that they're just coming in. They don't have any input from the community, and they're just here to do the job. So, but he said he'd work well with Becca, the school department, which I also think is very important. I think all three candidates brought up during this time how important it is to work with our school department and have that a priority. So it made me inspired with these interviews. And I would say that my first choice, although I think the first two would both be great candidates, my first choice would be the same as Mr. Often, which is Mr. Taranzini.
All right. Ms. Roy?
I'm not sure what else there is to say. I mirror everybody's sentiments. My top two would be between Mr. Taranzini and Mr. Garino. I had the same thing written down as Mr. Frisbee. The budget's the single biggest policy of the year. That stood out to me, especially going into the budget season that we will be going into. I think that's huge. He mentioned his strong financial record. He wanted to know what our priorities were, and he was just very easygoing. I felt very comfortable right from jump with him. So I really like that. And same with Mr. Garino. He absolutely did his homework. To be referencing the fire study in the detail that he was very impressive. So I think we'd be in good hands with either candidate.
All right, thank you. So yeah, I'm agreeing with all of you. I will point out that, I thought the first two, Mr. Taranzini and Mr. Garino, both had, the short-term, ideas that, in their mind and their responses. I do believe Ms. Nazarian's responses, I think, has a lot of the characteristics of what we're looking for the permanent town administrator position. And, I would encourage her, to definitely, apply for that one as well. She would not be my first choice for a temporary position either. I did like the fact that both Mr. Taranzini and Mr. Garino were both extremely flexible. I will point out that part of what I'm looking for here is, if they feel we need additional feet on the ground, they're not afraid to tell us that I need to be here more often, or if they feel that, we can do this 3 days a week. And that was part of my question, like, how much time do you think you're going to need to be here in order to work? And I know things are a lot different than they were, 10, 12 years ago when Grafton last did this. Everything is, done a lot more online. But this job in particular is about people. And you need to be in that business of working and dealing with people day in and day out. And that's a lot of the public facing. We expect the town administration's office. It's really between them and the clerk's office. They're the front line. People come in and talk to them probably the most. And I like the fact that both of those candidates were, more than willing to say, if we need me here 5 days a week, and for those reasons, then they'll state the reasons why. I will point out that I thought a lot of the reporting, you were talking about the audits, the budgeting process and the policy. I couldn't agree more. The CARES Act was something that really kind of stood out to me as well. I'll be honest with you, I was reminded that there's a deadline for that. And I think that's important at Grafton, and that's a short-term thing that we need someone here to oversee for us, right? So I really like the fact that that was pointed out tonight. And I would agree. I would think Mr. Taranzini would be my first choice, followed by Mr. Garino, and then, obviously Ms. Nazarian. But anyway, I thought it was great input by everyone here, so thank you. So at this point, if there isn't any more discussion, or if anyone else has anything they want to add, what's the board's wishes to move on to the next step here? We have 3 candidates here tonight. Mr. Prisby.
So, Mr. Chair, how would you prefer this happen? Do you want the board to indicate to you its preference in a candidate by vote, and then authorize you to enter into negotiations for hiring that candidate?
Hiring and execute, yes.
Okay, then I will make a motion that the board hire Carter Taranzini as its temporary town administrator.
Second.
I have a motion to award Mr. Taranzini as temporary town administrator for Grafton. Is there any discussion on the motion? Mr. Often.
Yeah, can I just offer a friendly amendment? So are we asking our chair to enter into those negotiations on our behalf?
I think I was just going to do it in 2 separate motions. Maybe we can do it in 1 motion.
You could do it in 2 separate motions, it's fine.
Okay, fine. Then, yeah, I'm good.
Yep. Okay, any other discussion on motion for Mr. Taranzini? All right, hearing none, by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio.
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Frisbee,
Frisbee, aye.
Miss Roy,
Roy, aye.
Mr. Austin,
Often I.
Peter Carlson, aye. Okay, declare the motion carried 5-0. Thank you. So at this point, if someone would like to make a motion or have another idea, just authorize the chair to enter negotiations and execute an agreement upon successful negotiation of contract.
Move the board authorize chair to negotiate with Mr. Taranzini and execute contract upon the completion of successful negotiations of the same.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion? Okay, hearing none. By roll call vote, please. Mr. Fazio,
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Frisbee,
Frisbee, aye.
Miss Roy,
Roy, aye.
Mr. Austin,
Often I.
Peter Carlson, aye. Okay, declare the motion carried 5-0. Thank you very much. In the meantime, if the board's okay with this, on behalf of the board, I will reach out to each one of the individual members and thank them for their time and appreciate them coming in. If that's okay with you, I can handle that tonight. Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much for that. We'll be following up on developments and I'll reach out to Mr. Taranzini after the meeting this evening. Okay, moving on down the agenda here. We don't have any resignations. We already went through the appointments for election worker. We don't have any TA appointments. At this point in time, let's go to new business. Adopt the charge for town administrator search committee. So this was as a result of our meeting last week to have something in front of us today. Let me just get to that part of the agenda because I was brought to my attention a question this evening with regards to the charge. All right, any discussion? Anyone want to open this up to discussion? Or do you want to hear what, oh, Ms. Roy, please.
So I went through the charge as written, and there was a couple amendments I was gonna propose if possible. Do you want me to just go through all of them? 'Cause it's in each section.
If you give me 1 second, I think there's a way I can do this in real time and get the exact amendments so we can all see them. If you give me 1 second.
Yep.
Okay, I'm going to share my screen out so we can all see it. Will that work?
Yep.
Okay. All right, can everyone see that? Okay, Ms. Roy, you have the floor.
So under section 1, the screening committee will be responsible for reviewing. I was hoping we could change that to all applications received to fill out the current vacancy in the position of town administrator in accordance with section 4-6 of the Grafton Town Charter, rather than the bylaw. The bylaw to me wasn't as detailed as the charter. And it also covers the question that comes up later saying all applications received because that's how the charter is written.
Okay,
Did I-
what about- so explain that to me one more time. Do you have that already written or
Yeah, yep, I did that. You want me to send it to you?
would you send it to me and I'll put that in there? So it's under section 1?
Section 1 of the charge. So if you go right after screening committee for reviewing. Yep. And it says all applications received.
You want to change it to say all applications received?
Yes, because that's how it's worded in our charter. Instead of qualified applicants, so just remove qualified applicants. And then it says, yep, to fill out position of town administrator all the way down. And then in accordance with section 4-6 of the Grafton Town Charter instead of the bylaw.
So if I can right there, guys, before we do that, I would say both because it's not really one or the other. The charter controls, but what the bylaw is supposed to do is give slightly more specific instruction that doesn't necessarily overrule the charter. So I would do and. So section 4-6 of the charter and article 32 of the town general bylaws.
Is that
Make
okay
sense?
with you, Ms. Roy?
Yeah, that's great.
Okay. All right.
Section 2, I rewrote entirely different. Section 2 made me feel like the consulting company could almost overpower the screening committee, and I didn't like the way that made me feel particularly, but if I'm on an island, then let me know. I wrote it as the select board will hire a consultant to assist the search committee in receiving a number of qualified candidates for the town administrator position. The consultant will also provide guidance to the screening committee as needed.
That's great.
So, all right. I like where you're going with that. The one reason why I think under the direction of a consulting agency is that the consulting agency is going to do all of the dotting the i's and crossing the t's when posting and then handling all the applicants. Let's throw this out there. Let's say it was written the way you were right now, and the committee decided to, I don't know, go rogue, okay, and could potentially cause some problems for the town if applicants are, mistreated in any way or not handled appropriately per state and federal law that really protects this. And I think Mr. Prisby might know where I'm going with this a little bit. So I want to know how would a consulting company then still be able to do what they need to do without being overwritten by a committee or by a committee? Because the reason why we're hiring consulting companies, we don't have an HR department.
Yeah, so this is sort of the kind of the problem with doing it this way. Obviously, the upside is you're trying to, again, cast the widest net possible in the most professional way possible. But Colleen's right. Like our charter gives the screening committee a tremendous amount of authority to cull the names and deliver them to us. And we are to choose, again, that word shall, choose from the names that are given to us by the screening committee. So we would be sort of ending around the screening committee's authority if you were to say, well, the consulting agency actually has the authority here at the end of the day. I mean, according to the charter and the bylaws, the screening committee could also cull names of applicants that would be presented to the board in addition to the consultant. I don't think that's the way it's going to go, but I think as a matter of what the charter and the bylaws say, we don't have the authority to make the screening committee subjugated to the consulting group, technically speaking. And again, I think this is a conversation about nothing. I think ultimately at the end of the day, the consultant does its job. It brings us a number of qualified applicants that we're going to be overjoyed to have. And that's going to be, it'll be the screening committee's job to whittle that down. I would be comfortable if the screening committee just worked with and not under the direction of a consulting agency. But I also like Colleen's language there too.
Okay. Ms. Wright, can you restate that language for me about where you wanted to enter what?
So I just rewrote it entirely saying the select board will hire a consultant to assist the search committee in receiving a number of qualified candidates for the town administrator position.
So the select board shall hire a consultant to what? I can't type as fast as you're saying. I'm sorry.
No problem, sorry. To assist the search committee.
The screening committee language, okay?
Sure.
Okay.
In receiving a number of qualified candidates. For the town administrator position. The consultant will also provide guidance to the screening committee as needed. That's all I had for section 2.
Okay,
Section 3 seemed redundant and it was repeating section 1, so I crossed it out entirely. I don't know if anybody else felt that way.
Seems that way.
well, I'm reading section 2. The select board shall hire a consultant to assist the screening committee in receiving a number of qualified candidates for the town administrative position. The consultant shall provide guidance to the screening committee as needed. So then the screening committee needs some sort of action. The screening committee shall be responsible for reviewing all qualified applicants for the position of the town administrator. But
That's
yeah,
in section 1.
yeah, okay. So you think we don't need the section 3?
So let me ask you this question, though. The charter says that it's going to review all applications received, but then at the same time, the charter is very specific about what the qualifications are. I would assume the action item or one of the action items that the committee is taking in between sections 2 and 4 is culling out the non-qualified applications, right?
I see your point. I think 3 is redundant. You're right. I'm rereading section 1.
So what if we change section 3 to say the screening committee shall be responsible for determining the qualifications of the applications to be forwarded to the select board. And then section 4 then goes on and says they will interview a minimum number of X and forward them to us by Y date.
All right, so you want to say the screening committee shall be responsible for,
Determining the qualifications of the applicants in accordance with Article 32 of the town's general bylaws. And I guess you could say the charter there, but in this specific instance, Article 32 is actually more specific about what the qualifications are than the town charter is.
so the screening committee shall be responsible for determining the qualifications
Yes,
of the applicants.
and forwarding those qualified applicants to the select board for consideration.
There's something really messed up with the formatting here, so I'll fix this later.
Yeah, you got a box there.
Yeah, it's part of the conversion from the PDF to the Word document. It sometimes reads them as text boxes. I can go back and fix that later. Let me see if I can just do this. Yeah, everything's in a text box here. Let me just do this 1 second here. I'm testing my word skills here. There we go. So you want to say qualifications, right?
Mhm.
I don't know why it keeps wanting to do that. Qualifications of the applicants and forward to the select board for consideration.
Right.
I think I know what the problem is. There we go. All right, so we know that's section 3. I'll fix the formatting later. All right. In section 4?
So I had another idea for section 4 too, shocker.
Okay.
The screening committee shall deliver to the select board not more than 150 days following the date of which the committee meets to organize, not less than 3, nor more than 5 persons whom it believes to be the best suited to perform the duties of the office town administrator. And that's basically right from the charter. I didn't know if adding a minimum of applicants would just cause, I mean, I'm sure they're going to get a lot of applicants, but if we say a minimum of 15, but they get 12 great candidates, where does that put the search committee, right?
So we say in section 1 that in accordance with section 4.6 of the town charter, I think restating it later on, Colleen, would be redundant unless there's something specifically, and we got to be careful with the charge that it doesn't contradict the bylaw and the charter, right?
No, I'm just trying to, so section 4, the way it's written now is a minimum of applicants. So the minimum is all. So why would we write that? And then delivered to the board no later than close of business day on a specific date, which is spelled out in the charter, 150 days after the first time they meet. So again, difficult to put a date in there. And then because we don't know when the first time they're going to meet is, right? And then the name of up to 5, because it's between 3 and 5 semifinalists in no particular ranked order.
So we have to call out the minimum number of applicants is what you're saying.
Yeah, I would just strike that out altogether because the minimum is all. They need to interview all of them per the charter.
So I just want to discuss that one point really quickly if we can. So I think what the charter is getting at might be a little bit different, Colleen, than what you're getting at. You're getting at they've got to review all of them. We've got up to 150 days to get this done. If there is a number that appears to be insufficient, like how long does this go on? If they get 30 applicants right away and they're ready to roll and they're ready to come to us, is it too soon just to have it open for a month? Do we keep it open longer? Or what if, conversely, on the other end of the possibility spectrum, what if they just get 2? And we're like, well, now we're going to do what we can do to hold this open longer. You know, we've got up to 150 days, but you get 2 applicants in 60 days. Don't come to us with the 2. You've got to interview longer. So how do we provide the screening committee with specific instruction on this? I'm pretty sure the charter says within 150 days. It doesn't say it has to take 150 days. So there's this balance between how long is it going to take you to get this done and get a number of good applicants versus us wanting to get it done quickly. I think it was Taranzini who suggested that this might take up to 6 months. I was a little bit surprised by that. Like, you know, the position's open for as long as it is.
I want to talk about the timing as well, that Mr. Prisby. I agree with you. Is the last time Grafton went through this, it took a lot longer than 6 months. By the way, 150 days from today, if we adopt this charge, is January 15th.
But it's not from when we adopt the charges, from when the screening committee first organizes.
Right. So that could be, you know, February 1st, for all we know. Okay,
but that's not what this section is saying, right? I mean, right. All right. So I'm just putting that out there. I agree with you. You know, so how would we want to phrase section 4?
Well, I think we first have to determine, do we want this to go up to 150 days under the charter? If the answer is yes, then that part's easy. And then you can leave the minimum alone and say, look, you're interviewing all the applicants that you get and you're screening from that list. And within 150 days, we want you to provide us with these finalists, and it's up to you to figure out how you do that.
Mr. Optum.
Yeah, I'm not sure if we want to hamstring this screening committee with interviewing every applicant. I think they need to review all of the applicant resumes, but they definitely don't need to interview every single one.
I agree with what Mr. Opton just said.
All right, so how do you want to phrase this? Someone give me some direction here.
Do you want me to read what I said before and see if you like that?
Oh, it's not that I like it. I just want to be able to type it in here so we can all see it, Ms. Roy. That's all. I just want to, yeah.
The screening committee shall deliver to the select board not more than 150 days following the date on which the committee meets to organize not less than 3 nor more than 5
What was it? To organize not more than what?
not less than 3 nor more than 5 persons whom it believes to be the best suited to perform the duties of the office of town administrator.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
So I like what Colleen is saying here. And I just want to jump back to what Mr. Prisby said a minute ago, just about how to clarify the 150 days. And I think that my concern would be if we had applicants in, let's say we had 10 applicants in the first 30 days and they were interviewed and we said, oh, well, we have some great finalists, but we're going to wait the entire 150 days. We could potentially lose some good candidates and some people who would be really enthusiastic about working for the town of Grafton, but could have other opportunities as well. So I think that I like the statement, not more than 150 days. But having the flexibility of the screening committee to be able to deliver within those 150 days if they feel suited to do so.
I have an idea about that.
Mr. President.
What if we put in the charge that they can close deliberation prior to the 150 days upon a supermajority of a vote of their members?
You're saying supermajority, Mr. Prisby. That has some connections and you just mean a simple majority, right?
Yeah, okay. That's fine. But yeah, upon a vote of their members, if they vote to close it, then
I like that.
fine.
So let me ask you this. So we're on the screening committee, there's 5 of us. And we shall deliver to the select board not more than 150 days following the date in which we all organize and submit, we should say submit. Should say that rather. Not less than 3 or more than 5 persons who they believe. So let's just say we can't get this done in 120 days or 90 days. If a majority of the feel that we've got ample amount of candidates, correct? So do we need language in there? I mean, I think it's there already. Then there's a mechanism in there that they can get it done sooner if they get it done sooner, to your point, Mr. Fazio. Or if they feel that they need all 150 days. What if they need more than 150 days? What if they don't have, what if they don't have the 3 or more? You know what I mean? So
That's the crisis I don't want to tackle tonight. It's,
well,
I mean, at some point you have to hire, you would probably just have to reorganize the committee. I think at that point would be the way it would go. The way I see that, you're right, Peter, like, I don't think we necessarily need to tell them that they can come back to us before the 150 days. I think it's implied in the charter, but I do see the charge as giving a little bit of direction. I could see where this could come up in a meeting later where people aren't necessarily sure and they have to come back to the board for direction. And this instruction might save them from having to do that.
so the way it's written right now, you think that is sufficient?
And then after what Colleen had stated, adding a sentence of what Ed had just stated about, that the board, or the committee rather, the screening committee would take a vote to determine whether to move forward with finalists or not. And it would be the majority.
Now, just throwing this out there while Peter types, when we do interview for the consultants, these are some more specific things we can request of them, correct? Like, we want X number of candidates in the first X number of days to ensure that the screening committee stays on track. For my off base.
Oh, I think that's perfectly fine. I would think that we're going to pay these people, any consulting group is going to want to sit around and yeah. Of course, they may tell us, hey, we're going to get all the applicants that are interested. We can't control what the volume is for Grafton.
So I real quick, I added some language I think that accommodates Mr. Prisby, what you said. Can you just read that and either tell me that makes sense or if that needs to change?
Yeah, I think that's fine. I guess if I were being extra careful, I would add a sentence that just suggests nothing in this section shall be construed to mean the process must take 150 days. But I could go either way on it. Maybe I'm just overthinking it. I don't want to overthink it. You guys tell me if I'm wrong.
Mr. Chair,
Yeah, Mr. Often.
I think it's pretty clear. I mean, not more than is very clear that you take the time that you need, don't take any more time. I think everybody's going to be pretty clued up that we're looking for a new town administrator, and the sooner the better. That's no mystery to me.
Yeah, anybody else? I have one other question. So the timing on when people are going to be meeting and making decisions is between Thanksgiving and 2 weeks after the holiday. It's been historically a very horrible time to try to get 9 people to meet between Thanksgiving holiday all the way through the December holidays. 150 days, like let's say this went in today, and I know, let's say they organize tomorrow and all the stars and moon align. Let's say this puts 150 days, puts it, let's say the end of January. Is that, are we giving them a constraint where it's going to be very difficult for 9 people to be able to get together and meet over that time? Because towards that last, let's say towards that last month and a half, they're formalizing everything. Everything's pretty much wrapped up, and then all of a sudden there's delays. You get 7 people to make the meeting. You got the majority, but you don't got the full representation of the screening committee. So you kind of see what my point is, and Ms. Roy and Ms. Fazio.
Ms. Fazio had her hand up first. I can go after.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fazio.
Thank you, Mr. Wright. Just a quick comment, Mr. Chairman, on that. I think that, again, having confidence in the screening committee and hiring a consultant / recruitment firm, this will be talked about. There'll be a timeline laid out right away of, okay, we're going to be running into the holidays. We're going to, what's our plan? And so I don't think we need to worry about that level of detail, in my opinion.
Okay. Ms. Roy?
I just wanted to talk about the holidays and the meeting, historically, you're right, that would have been an issue. Historically, if we were meeting tonight, Mr. Often wouldn't be here because he's in the Cape. I think Zoom has opened up flexibility more than it ever has. And I think they're in the best position they could be in to do this.
Mr. Often, is that true? Okay, all right. Sounds good. All right, is this section? Okay. All right, so just want to recap the changes real quick and one last time before we take a motion to approve this. Section 1. You guys want to see the one second here. Can you guys see that?
Yeah.
That would be the new section 3 once I get it into the document. All right. And then there's section 4. Mr. Often.
Yeah, so in section 4, you should say following the date in which the committee meets to organize.
Uh-huh. Okay. All right. Any other discussion?
Mr. Chair, just one more thing. What if the, I don't know, what we would call them, the unicorn candidate comes along? The committee's not ready to give 3. Do we want to stipulate no less than 3?
That's the way it's worded in our charter.
I see. Yep. Okay.
Any further discussion? We'll need a motion for this.
I move the board vote to adopt the charge for the town administrator search committee with the noted changes.
Second.
Motion made and seconded. Any discussion on the motion of the adopted charge with the changes? All right. Hearing none. All those by roll call vote. Mr. Fazio.
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Prisby.
Yeah.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, aye.
Mr. Often.
Often aye.
Peter Carlson's aye. Okay, declare the motion carried. I'll get this over to Cindy tonight with the changes in the document that we outlined. I'll send a copy to that, everyone, after I make that, so you all have a copy of those changes. Thank you very much. All right, so we already appointed a member of the select board to serve on the TA search committee. Select board member reports. Anybody have anything that they want to add? Mr. Fazio.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a couple quick things. So I have some new dates for the goals committee. So there's 3 dates in June. I'm sorry, June, listen to me, in September, where we could do the 8th, which is a Tuesday, but I believe is a workshop date for us. The 16th of September, which is a Wednesday, or the 22nd, which again is a Tuesday, I believe a workshop date. So I spoke to someone, and there's a couple other dates that are already booked. And then obviously we have our board meetings on other Tuesdays, and I was trying to stick to Tuesday and Wednesday dates just based on prior discussion of board members. So so again, 9/8, 9/16, or 9/22. So if we wanted to pick something, I could book the site for us and we can look forward to it.
Mr. Often?
Yep. I'd recommend that we do the Wednesday so that we just steer clear of regular meetings. We have a lot going on right now. And I just think if we can have a dedicated meeting where this is the only thing that's on the agenda and we're not crowding in with other things, or that would be the best scenario possible.
Ms. Roy?
I agree with what Mr. Often's saying. The 8th is standing out to me too. I think that was the deadline we gave all the committees to have their appointments in. So I don't know if there was any action we were going to need to take that night. So the 16th sounds like the safest bet.
Mr. Frisbee, any preference?
No, I'm on board with the Wednesday.
Okay, I am as well. All right.
Great. So I'll confirm that that date once it's booked. You know, obviously we've decided to meet in person. We can always change that, but just to reiterate that it'll be important for us to all be there for it to work well. So Wednesday, the 16th will be the date of our goals meeting.
Okay.
And then the second item I have is the Economic Development Commission met last night, and I'm the select board rep, and unfortunately I couldn't be there because, as you all know, we had a meeting last night. But I was thinking about looking at their agenda. We're discussing Shop Grafton for the upcoming holiday season, and I was just thinking, you know, in this transition, that maybe we should consider having EDC come in to us, or at least John Allen, our economic development coordinator. I think that we as a board can maybe do more to utilize them during this time. I have found over the time that I've been on that committee that there seems to be a lot of overlap with the town administrator's office on what's going on there and what's going on. And you know, I think giving them maybe some direction, hearing what's going on might be helpful all around. So I just wanted to, you know, have the discussion about having them on a future agenda, and that's it.
Okay. Any other select board member reports? I have got a couple. First of all, I wanted to thank the invitation I received to attend the celebration of the 74th India Independence Day that was held this Saturday. Colleen, Roy was able to join me for that ceremony. It was very good. It's amazing about the similarities that our two countries have in fighting for independence. And I just want to say it was a great event. I hope they do it again here in Grafton, and I hope other fellow board members and other community leaders can also participate. I think it was a great celebration to be enjoyed by our local community who are from that country. Other than that, I have a couple of things here from the library. I think all of you have received a correspondence about discussing, and I want to bring this up at a future agenda item, with regards to the Grafton Grafton Library Board intends to pursue, support from town government leaders, a fine-free library upon the grand opening of the new building in 2021. So is that something you guys want to have on a future agenda item to discuss internally? Okay, all right, I will do that. In addition to that, I received the correspondence from Beth Galloway, director from Grafton Public Library, and we had appointed Ms. Stock last year to serve as the liaison for the library's long-range planning committee. Didn't know if we had someone else to serve in her stead since she is, no longer with the board. They've only had one meeting in March, but I wanted to open that up to the committee to see if there was anybody of interest. If there is, we want to appoint someone, I can put that on the next agenda, on the next meeting, and we can appoint somebody. So I'm going to add that to the next agenda. All right. Okay. All right. Thank you. That's, I'm looking for affirmation. Thank you. And that's all I have for select board reports. We don't have any TA reports tonight. Ms. Roy, do we have some course? Oh, sorry, Mr.
Sure. I just have one question through you. And I asked Mr. Prisby this every so often about the Sustainability Commission. And again, just to reiterate, I voted in favor of it June of 2019. And so I just would like to get, an update from you, even if there's no update on where we're at and if the board is going to be receiving any sort of information in the near future. And I also wanted some clarification because I watched the Finance Committee meeting that took place last week, and they had also mentioned I'm a little confused by this, so I just want some clarification, some work regarding the Sustainability Commission in terms of maybe like staff audits or something. And I think it's important that, we had talked about this earlier this evening. I think Mr. Taranzini brought it up, just having clarification that the board is all on the same page and it's not just one person working through a committee. So I just was hoping that the board could get some clarification on at least what's going on with that, and if the Finance Committee is going to be involved in the Sustainability Commission in any way, and if so, at what capacity?
So the reason I didn't give an update tonight is because I keep overpromising on this, and I have what amounts to the final draft of the benchmarking report on my desk right now. And to be candid, what we've been going through with the past month has sucked all the life out of me for doing anything on the GSC as far as finishing that up. So, it's 10 o'clock at night. I'm sure at some point this week, I'll get to finish up the benchmarking report. The holdup with it really is the next two steps of the GSC are a determination of municipal cost structure, school cost structure, and revenue. And for those things, and for the very reasons that I think went over tonight with the various candidates, you really do kind of need to be in a room with somebody to sit down and talk about how budgeting is done, what decisions are made, talking about income streams, the fire department not billing insurance companies, our capacity to write grants. All of these little things are incredibly difficult to do via Zoom. And it's hard, honestly, to get 9 people to do various Zoom meetings and really call that information out. And we're going to have to decide at the next GSC meeting how we want to do that. So let me give you, for instance, school cost structure. About how much time should Jay and his staff be dedicating to the GSC to talk to us about school cost structure right now while we're trying to get kids back in school? I mean, it's, I'm getting resistance from people on my committee, and rightfully so, saying, when we started this, one of the concerns from people on the board was how much time the staff are you taking? And at the time, I wasn't that worried about it. I'm more worried about it now. I'm worried about it on the municipal end because I can't force someone to come sit in a room with me for hours at a time. And I'm worried about it on the school end because they have better things to do right now. But at the same time, we are still marching toward our next override, and this work does need to get done. So that's where we are with this, and we need to have a conversation in our next GSC meeting. As soon as I can plug in Barry's last bit of data into the beginning of the report, the benchmarking report will be done. We'll meet and we'll talk about it. As far as FinCom goes, no, there was an idea that some FinCom volunteers had brought to me about their wanting to review cost drivers as they relate to salary. And I thought in candor that that was a bit outside the scope of what FinCom does. And we've had that conversation before on the select board about what FinCom's scope is, but I did suggest to them that would be squarely within what the GSC would do. You know, again, if you're looking at municipal cost structure, you can't possibly not look at salaries because 80% of our spending is on salaries and benefits. So that's something that would be more appropriately done through GSC. And it just so happens there's 2 members of FinCom that are on GSC who could just as easily do it under the scope of GSC as opposed to FinCom. So no, you know, it's not one select board member riding off into the sunset on a mission. We're trying to move ahead as best we can, and within the terms of the scope of our mission.
Thank you for that clarification. You know, I will say I was just confused watching FinCom last night, and so I just thought, you know, it was an opportunity under select board reports to make sure that we're all on the same page. And certainly with GSC, you know, you're driving that bus, so I just figured I'd ask that question to begin with. And I will also say that, you know, maybe we have this discussion at our next board meeting. You know, we just appointed you to now be part of the screening committee, and in my opinion, that's a priority, right? And so I ask you every couple of months about the GSC just because I want an update. But I also want you to be at every, you know, screening committee appointment and meeting. So if that means that this is, in my opinion, again, if this means, you know, this is pushed off until after we hire a new town administrator, so be it. You know, I mean, I think we all have different priorities than what we went into last June. And that's just the reality. And so I completely understand that getting in front of school staff at this time would be a terrible idea. And, you know, we don't have a TA. And my main concern was having a finance committee be reviewing town administrator staff without the rest of the select board really know what's going on, or quite frankly, the town administrator's staff not know what's going on, because I don't think that's fair. So I appreciate the clarification.
Okay. Any other select board member reports? All right. Mrs. Roy, we have a few correspondence items.
Yes. We received correspondence from Kevin Brown voicing concern over posts made on social media by Dan Kusher. The Finance Committee have appointed Mark Haddad and Heather McHugh as the town administrator's screening committee. And we received an email that says, I am writing to you on behalf of the Finance Committee. The Town Administrator Screening Committee, defined in the charter, is comprised of 9 members, 2 of whom are appointed by the Finance Committee and 3 by the town moderator. That means 5 out of the 9 appointed directly or indirectly by the town moderator. This seems like a lot of influence for one person to have. Obviously, this cannot be changed in the time to have an effect on the current search, but our next charter review is 2027, and it is entirely possible that we could be searching for yet another new town administrator before then. Considering that, the Finance Committee would like to suggest that the Select Board consider proposing an article to town meeting, followed by a referendum at the next town election, to amend the charter to better balance the composition of the Town Administrator Screening Committee. We would be happy to work with the Select Board and the Town Moderator to draft a more equitable committee makeup. We appreciate your attention and cooperation on this matter. We look forward to hearing from you. Best regards, Mark Haddad, Chair of the Grafton Finance Committee. That is it.
All right. Okay, moving on to discussion. So we have a couple items here tonight. So we've brought forward from last week just a discussion item for FAQ for town webpage regarding developments and permanent appointment of new town administrator, including timeline for appointment. Is this something you want to pass over tonight and just get to the Q&A function for Zoom and then get on with the rest of our meeting, or do you guys want to still talk about this tonight? We have the charge. we have our appointment. Sounds like we have some deliverables done. I just put it here in case there was someone else had anything else that they wanted to bring up from last week. You okay with just passing over this tonight then? Nodding of heads. Ms. Roy? Okay, thanks. All right, then the Q&A function on Zoom webinars. Mr. Often, you asked to put this on.
I did. My headset's just about to die. So if it does, I'm going to switch over to my microphone. But just quickly, the first thing that I wanted to ask is, so my experience in most of our current, like our I don't know, recent meetings, I guess, has been sort of mystery science theater with just the running commentary during our entire meetings. And I find it a bit of a distraction. But if it's not a distraction for anybody else, I don't want to make a big deal out of it. So I guess I'd just like to understand where the board's at relative to the kind of ongoing Q&A throughout our meetings.
Mr. Prisby.
So I have the same concern. In theory, the Q&A ought to work the same way that public participation does in a meeting, right? But as we've all found out over the past 20 years with anything digital, digital means amplification. So it also means a change in behavior sometimes when people are sitting behind a keyboard and they're not in front of you. So for instance, we get reliably before COVID, we got 2 people in our meetings, and Colleen was one of them, right? And then since COVID happened, I can scroll over here. We've got 8 attendees at the meeting right now, which is actually a low point for us. Our meetings have been generating about 45 attendees prior to. And as much, and Zoom wasn't meant for this. It wasn't meant for public participation in public meetings. And you're sort of relying on people to understand that the Q&A is for Q in the typing and answer in the writing. And it has become, over the course of the past 3 months, just abusive at times, just straight up abusive. And, we're all here to serve and we're here to listen, but we're also here to govern, and we have to run a meeting. And we have to be able to do that in order to govern. So I'm not sure what policy we can make, because we can't change the program. We can't force someone to ask a question and not just make repeated comments throughout our discussion. But we can decide that we're only going to address questions. And we can decide when we're going to stop addressing the questions of someone that has abused of privilege, because that's part of running the meeting, the same way we would do it if we were in conference room A. On a side note, I would also say the same thing for correspondence. Reading correspondence in meetings was my idea last year. And it was my idea because I knew there was correspondence coming to us that was being ignored conveniently. And now it's become a function of, okay, someone made me angry online and I'm going to slam them and have the select board read it. That can't happen either. That's not the point of all this. There is a responsibility that people have to their democracy, and it's furthered by responsible participation and not just by getting on here and having it become just a sideshow. That's just a distraction. So I'm with you, Matt. Like we've definitely got to curtail this a little bit.
Anybody else? Ms. Roy?
I'm not super well versed in Zoom, but is it possible to turn the Q&A function off until we are looking for questions? So we don't have a running commentary, we don't have interruptive questions, so that we can stay on topic and maintain our constructive dialogue without interruption. And then when it is time for us to reach out to attendees for any question and answers, we turn that on. We give them 60 seconds or whatever it is. If nothing comes in, we move on. And if things come in, we'll address it. Is that possible with Zoom?
So I believe there is a way you can shut off those functions. And the issue you run into with that is the people can't type their question in, and then they have to wait till they have to open it up. And then they have a short amount of time to to ask your question. So yeah, we can do that. I think there's some logistical challenges that I think if we're asking the community to participate in asking questions versus having a serial conversation with us as though they're a sixth unofficial member of the board, right? I think you create some logistical challenges. But yeah, I believe you can shut off the Q&A function, and then you can turn it on upon when you want people to then participate.
I just say that because in public participation in the past, that's how you guys handled it. It was always when it was appropriate, they were addressing people. And sometimes the depending on the topic, the audience did get full. If cannabis was on the agenda, people were showing up, and people weren't just shouting out and heckling. They had to wait to be addressed, and they were addressed when it was time that the board felt it was appropriate. So if it is possible, I'm not trying to curtail participation. I'm just trying to suggest a way where it's appropriate, where it would have been handled if we were in person.
Okay, Mr. Fazio.
So I agree with what everybody's saying. I mean, it's disruptive, it's abusive, and I'd like to try to find a solution. And again, I'm not a Zoom expert either, but my sister resides in Rochester, New York, and we have the same genes, so we spend a lot of time in public meetings. And she, in her city, when they're on Zoom meetings and somebody from the audience wants to participate, they make them a panelist. And so if you want to ask a question, you're a panelist for a minute, you're called upon from the chair, just like you'd be called up to a podium to ask your question. And then when the question is answered from the board, just like walking away, the panelist is taken off again. And so, it sort of, when I saw that happen for the first time, I thought, oh, wow, you don't have someone just keyboard blasting? She said, no, we have hundreds of people at this meeting. That would be terrible. And so, I think being in a smaller community, we've just accepted the fact that, oh, we only have 40 or so people, but it's typically the same one or two people writing 20 comments. And I'm wondering if, we called a person on as a panelist, we can decide, because just like in meetings, whether or not the chairman wants to, or in this case, the vice chair, since I've been doing the Q&A, wants to alert the chairman to have somebody come onto the screen and ask a question. It may be a more civil conversation than just comment after comment. So I don't know if that's possible, but it seems to be possible in other communities. It seems the meeting seems to run a lot more smoothly.
Mr. Often.
Yeah, thank you. Is that, Doreen, is that the raise hand feature where you can promote? Yeah. So I'd be in favor of that. Just to be clear, I like the Q&A function. I think it's a useful thing. I definitely do not want to discourage public commentary and public input. Just like if we were in an in-person meeting at the municipal center, in many meetings, there are circumstances where people are passionate about certain topics and want to get up, or they're subject matter experts, or they happen to have a certain perspective about something that the board finds valuable to its discussion. Absolutely, I want to encourage that public input. The trouble that I have is just, you're seeing the Q&A ticker, tick up and up and up. And just as a board member trying to have a discussion and deliberate about something, it's challenging to not pay attention to that. So for me, if we could have somebody raise their hand, or if we could set up a situation where we, based on certain topics, decided that, okay, this would be a good opportunity for public input. So we're going to allow public commentary and have it be a little bit more deliberate, so that we can just have our discussions kind of traffic free, I guess, or I don't know, without interruption, but also allow some public input. It's an interesting question that we face, I guess. I do like the idea of trying the raise hand function where you bring somebody in and they're actually part of the conversation as if we were in a public meeting. They stood up to the mic and they were addressing the board. It's a different situation than if you have somebody just typing something in. And I'd favor that approach.
Mr. Chairman, can I add to
Yeah,
that, please? Thank you. So, Mr. Often, you bring up a great point too, that I just thought if, as you know, we're always here as board members having this discussion, but I'm sure it's just as frustrating to be a member of the public and trying to get your opinion across through comments. And so, you know, I think if I was on the other side, I would want to try to communicate in person and just have, you know, a minute or two to address the board with a question in person instead of typing a question that may or may not be ignored purposely or not on purpose, you know, because that's the other thing. When I get 27 questions in, I'm scrolling and maybe miss one or miss the interpretation of the question. So, you know, I think it goes both ways too. And I agree. I certainly in no way at all want to stop public input. I just want to improve it. And I feel like you just pointed out to me that there is probably frustration on both sides.
Okay. So what's the takeaway tonight? Can someone summarize it for me? Mr. Often.
Yeah, so I would turn off I think you're gonna have to work probably with town, like the technology department in town. And maybe we should do a practice run of this, but yeah, let's try turning off the Q&A and allowing people to raise their hands as participants, and promote them as speakers to, you know, actually address the board.
Okay, Ms. Roy?
When did we want to start that? Is it too soon to start that, or? I mean, we have a Q&A right now, and if we wanted to test run it, upgrade that person to a panelist and let them ask their question.
Actually, that question is exactly what we're talking about. It's not even a question. It's basically like, oh, we'll stop abusing Q&A if Prisby stops saying things on social media, which I'm not willing to do. Sorry. Like, how much control are we actually exerting over this?
Well, the chair has the authority to, you know, call people, you know, to the floor and have the floor. And then once, you know, the chair decides that, you know, enough time's been spent, you know, we move on. I think we saw a little bit of that earlier this evening.
Well, that's actually a really good example. I was going to ask you. So, I mean, we were getting to a point with Ethel where it was uncomfortable because that was a conversation that needed to happen between her attorney and our attorney. And try as you might, Mr. Chair, it was really hard to reel that conversation in without just getting the hook and hitting the button that exits somebody from a meeting.
Well, and I think that raises the point. So when you're the host of the webinar, you can hook people out. And I mean, in this situation, I didn't threaten that, obviously, as a course of action. I just told her, you're out of line. You know, please stop. And eventually she did. And, you know, we got control of the meeting, which I was happy that, you know, cooler heads prevailed. But it's not uncommon that if people are unruly during our business meeting, that the chair has to then take some action in order to get ordered back to the business meeting. Otherwise, this will be helter skelter. You know, this will be something to Mr. Often and Ms. Fazio had pointed out. It creates disruption. That's what I'm understanding on both sides. So there has to be some sort of order at these meetings. They're not just free-for-alls. You know, and if that's the case, then, you know, then I would have to be promoted as the, you know, as the host. And, you know, believe me when I say this, I hope I never have to do that. Okay. But that could be a way to, you know, bring order back to the meeting. Whereas if we were in person, I would ask the person to leave the meeting, which I could do. I would have to have some really good reasons. I wouldn't just do that unilaterally. I don't think any chair would do that unilaterally, first of all. And if things became worse, then it could be very much if we saw one incident at town meeting when the moderator asked the police to escort a gentleman out because they were not following the protocol. But that was after subsequent warnings. That was after a lot of discussion. It wasn't just a rash decision, although some people may differ with that, but, you know, to each their own opinion. That's what would have to happen. So I'd have to be promoted as host. Mr. Hoffman, you had your hand up.
Yeah, I was just going to say, similar to how we've dealt with Q&A, I think you already have a lot going on. You don't necessarily need to have that role of promoting somebody as a panelist or removing them from the meeting or whatever. You know, certainly it could be somebody else.
Mr. Fazio raised their hand very quickly after that. That sounds like a great idea.
Well, I mean, I'm doing the Q&As anyway, so it sort of makes sense to delegate that down to the vice chair. So I'd be happy to take that responsibility. And I also just want to add that, you know, for the public who's watching meetings at 10:30 at night that may have a question, and you don't want to be on screen necessarily, you know, you could still ask a question and hide view. So we don't necessarily have to see you, just hear you, but it's more of a conversation too. So because people might decide that they don't want to be seen at 10 o'clock at night, and I get that too.
Okay. All right, so why don't we do that for the next meeting? We'll work out the logistics with the TA's office who runs the Zoom account, and we'll test it out. And we'll see how it goes at the next meeting. Does that work for everybody? Okay. Wonderful. All right, we're coming up here on 11:15. We still have some things to do tonight, so if there isn't anything else under the discussion, I do have a reason to go. We have no meeting minutes tonight, but I do have a reason to go into executive session tonight. So if Ms. Roy could read the motion into the record, we could take a vote to conclude our business.
I move the board to enter into executive session in accordance with the open meeting law, Mass General Law, Chapter 30A, Section 21A, pursuant to Purpose 2, to conduct strategy session in preparation for negotiation with non-union personnel and improve prior meeting minutes.
Second.
I have a motion made and second to go into executive session. Any discussion? Hearing none, by roll call, please. Mr. Fazio.
Fazio, aye.
Mr. Often.
Often aye.
Ms. Roy.
Roy, aye.
Mr. Frisbee.
Frisbee, aye.
Peter Carlson, aye. Guys, stick here for a minute. I want to thank everyone for tonight's meeting. We will only be going into regular session for the purposes of adjournment. All right, so if the select board would just hang out, I will clear the room.